across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk. Hey, listen, it's a Thursday evening. I'm Duncan Barkes in for Peter Cardwell here at the home of common sense. It is Talk. Good to have you along. As always, I always give out the number early doors because it's really important, because you are going to hear stuff over the next few hours and you are going to want to engage. 0344 499 1000. We'll put your calls on the air between now and 10 p.m. If you send voice notes, I guarantee I will play them out. 0344 499 1000. And of course, that number for your WhatsApp messages and text numbers, or rather text, come into the following number, 87222. Start your message with the word Talk. A bit of chat going on this evening about Harry and Meghan. We have an exclusive for you inside the next 10 minutes regarding the kind of place they're going to move into. And I don't think it'll surprise you massively, though it might do. We'll talk to Charlotte Griffiths, editor-at-large of The Mail on Sunday, shortly about Harry and Meghan. And the conversation needs to continue regarding who should fork out roughly £5 million a year for their security. Now, just hear me out for a second, OK? Just hear me out for a second, because I'm as appalled as you have been regarding the behaviour of these two, all right? I think they've behaved appallingly. I think they've treated their father and other members of the royal family in the most outrageous way possible, OK? So that's my starting point. But just help me out here tonight on Talk. There's a sliver in my mind, and it is a sliver, and I'd say it's probably about 10%, maybe 15% here, which is a little bit of doubt regarding the idea that we should not help them with the security. Now, hear me out, because I do know it's a very contentious issue, and I think I'm with you tonight on the idea that we shouldn't be paying for their security. But just hear me out for a second, and it's this, all right? Like him or not, Harry is a high-profile member of the royal family. He doesn't do the royal duties, right, but he's got the profile. We also know, because in his book Spare, he talked about admitting killing over 20 Taliban. Now that, in the mindset of certain people around the world who've got some weird ideologies, make him a justifiable target. And essentially, regardless of everything else that he's done, the shame that he has brought on the royal family, he's still one of us, right? So just help me out here tonight, because I was driving in earlier and I was thinking about this, and I found myself wobbling just ever so slightly, thinking maybe, you know what, the taxpayer, you and me, should fork out for his security and that of his family, because he is a target and we need to protect him. Now, tell me if I'm missing something with that. 0344 499 1000. Am I being too soft on the lad? Or am I onto something here? Because ultimately, he is a target. We should be protecting him. And as I said a few moments ago, for some weird people around the world, those who have certain ideologies they subscribe to, political or religious ideologies, they will see him as a justifiable target. So on that point, should we not help out with the security costs whilst they're in this country? I don't know what I think about this, which is why I'm asking you. 0344 499 1000. Give me your calls on that. WhatsApp me on that number and send voice notes as well. I want to get into that a little bit later on. I also want to keep an eye on what's happening in Middlesbrough tonight. Now, listen, if you listen or watch Talk in the Middlesbrough area, there's a report doing the rounds that effectively is saying you've got hundreds of police officers right across the country that are being deployed to Middlesbrough this evening amid fears of escalating gang violence in the town. I just want to take Middlesbrough's temperature tonight. I'll be honest with you, this is a little bit of a punt here on Talk. I don't want to scaremonger, but I'm a great believer in proper eyewitness journalism. So if you are living in or around Middlesbrough tonight, I'm hearing reports of hundreds of police officers right across the place. There's been a series of suspected gang-related incidents that have taken place since Saturday, when a wrong-way crash on the A66 killed 2 police officers. Since then, a 7-year-old girl and her aunt have been killed in a house fire. A house in the town has been rammed and a 39-year-old man has been stabbed. And apparently, according to reports, Residents of Middlesbrough fear carnage if the gang feuds escalate. On top of this, there's the Labour MP for Middlesbrough and Thornaby East, a bloke called Andy MacDonald, who's told our colleagues here at Times Radio that the crime and disorder happening in Middlesbrough is, and this is his word, terrorism. So it's, as I say, it's a little bit of a punt here tonight at Talk, but if you live in Middlesbrough, if you work in Middlesbrough, and you have a few moments, get in contact with us tonight. 0344 499 1000 is the number. A little bit later on in this hour, we have a couple of titans of political debate joining me in the Talk studio. As part of the debate desk, we have James Hodgkinson, Research Associate at the Adam Smith Institute, and also Leo Watson, political commentator. We'll get them in the studio and chew over some of the big political stories of the day. But first, let's turn our attention to Harry and Meghan. Let's talk to Charlotte Griffiths, editor-at-large of The Mail on Sunday. Evening, Charlotte. Good to see you. Good to hear you.
Thanks.
So many things to chew over here. It's something that our audience and listeners here at Talk find depressing in some ways, fascinating in others. We learned yesterday lunchtime when I was on air here at Talk that they'd landed at Birmingham Airport. This has all happened remarkably quickly, hasn't it?
Yes, we only found out a week or so ago that they were coming. And then the next thing we know, there's a ginormous, huge private jet with 19 rows of seats landing at Birmingham. And what really depressed me today, actually, speaking of feeling depressed, was seeing the new pictures which have emerged of this fleet, this cavalcade of blacked out Range Rovers and then a big Mercedes people carrier leaving Birmingham Airport. Because I just thought this is the most conspicuous arrival ever. And yet we're all supposed to be, you know, carefully guarding their privacy, giving them the space they need. They're very, very hot on nobody naming the location of their house or, of course, the school, which is, you know, of course, with the school, it's fair enough. But they've come in very combative, yet at the same time, completely conspicuous.
And there is a massive dollop of hypocrisy here because they kind of describe themselves as people who care about the planet and the environment and whatnot. I mean, if you cared that much, you might get a standard flight out of the US into the UK. So those emissions are made from an aeroplane and shared across a number of passengers running into the hundreds. But instead, we have a private jet here, which I believe cost around 90 grand.
Yes, it was something like 9,000 a minute or something. Oh, actually, I might have done the maths wrong because it is a flight from LA. But yeah, a huge amount of money. And the really depressing thing is it just sat there on the tarmac for ages with those engines whirring, blasting out gas. And so begins the drama. You know, it really was. It was a dramatic entrance. I wouldn't be surprised if it was in some way choreographed because there's been a lot of narrative recently. And I was starting to believe it myself, that they have completely run out of money. And then they make this ginormous entrance, this huge jet. And it was as if they were saying, stop the narrative that we've run out of money. We're here, we're back, we're more bling than ever. And, you know, we're going to blast through the United Kingdom in the next few weeks with lots and lots of publicity.
What's your take, Charlotte, on the real reason that they've returned?
I do think it is to do with Archie's education. So he is going into the year before prep school. So traditionally, aristocratic families, they start their kids at age 8, you know, and they always say state to late for those of us who can't quite manage to send them to private school before then. But there is this kind of age that they say, and it's 8, where you start this prep school. And then Harry had this incredible Ludgrove prep education, which he apparently loved. He was at a London school before then. And it's kind of this beautiful countryside, idyllic, you know, swallows and Amazons type prep school that a lot of these rich aristocratic children have at these prep schools, and Harry himself had. So I can see the motivation that he wanted Archie to have that, and also to get to know his British roots, maybe get his British accent back or there for the first time. So there's a bit of that. But I also just think Harry's desperately been hankering for the UK and has missed his friends. But I do feel, I sense what you were hinting at. I do feel there's something else that we don't yet know. There's something under the surface. It was so sudden. He hadn't even told his father when he was at Highgrove that he was coming. I'd heard whispers about it as far back as May, that he was coming over to House Hunt. So it's been in the works for a while. But there's got to be something. There always is something with these two that you find out down the line.
Can we take it as read then that Meghan no longer feels that Great Britain is racist?
She must have had a complete change of heart about the UK, because here she is. The dogs were on the plane.
Yeah.
I thought we were all heartless, unconsciously biased, horrible, dreadful people. But she was at Highgrove meeting the king, having obviously been very down on the royal family. So something has changed. But, you know, they are saying, her camp is saying that she's going to carry on going to LA frequently. So it feels that she's got one foot in and one foot out of LA, of Montecito. However, I think Harry is fully in. He is both feet into the UK. I cannot see him going back, maybe for the odd holiday. But I think this is him now for the long haul back in the UK.
Have we got any idea what they're going to do for cash? Because, of course, we had this speculation several days ago that one of the reasons Meghan was coming back here is because she'd been offered a role in Guy Ritchie's The Gentleman. That has since been poo-pooed. I mean, I don't know. Are we going to see her behind the bar of The Rover's Return, or are we going to see her in the next series of The Traitors? I mean, what are they going to do for Wonga?
My hunch is that she will do acting, and that she'll do some sort of stage acting first. It's often the way with actresses or actors who have fallen out of acting, to then test the waters a bit with a West End show. It's seen as more elegant and prestigious. You know, that's the rumour doing the rounds. But then again, as you say, the rumour was also doing the rounds that she had this Guy Ritchie role, which turned out to be nothing of the sort. I think it was probably little more than a conversation. But that often happens with the Sussexes. A conversation will take place and they'll leap on it and spin it out as part of their narrative. You know, we saw that even with the naming of Lilibet. They had a confusingly minimal conversation with the Queen about saying they may or may not name their daughter Lily, and then the Queen was sort of spellbounded to find that they'd named their daughter fully Lilibet, and that the conversation really hadn't taken place to quite the extent that they'd said it had. So that happens a lot with them, that they run with something that really is only half baked. And I think that's what happened with The Gentleman, which was the Guy Ritchie series she was supposed to be a part of, but apparently is no longer a part of.
And the issue that's dominating much of the chat around Harry and Meghan returning to the UK is about who should pay for their security. And I mentioned earlier, look, I think they've behaved appallingly over the years. I think they've treated the royal family, you know, blood relatives, with utter contempt, and has been disgraceful. However, there's a small part of my brain that does acknowledge that, you know, for some people around the world, Harry is a legitimate target. He said himself in his book Spare that, you know, he killed a number of Taliban, I think 20 to 25 of the Taliban. There will be some people who think that actually he's fair game. Is there any argument, in your view, that the taxpayer in the UK should fund their security?
I don't think the taxpayer should fund their security. I do think possibly he needs security because of, as you say, he dropped himself in it by writing that in Spare. It's obviously a febrile atmosphere at the moment. You know, the Anne Widdecombe tragedy was awful. Yes. It is a dangerous, in theory, time to be a public figure in the UK if you've made controversial statements like he has. But I don't see why he can't pay for it himself. At one point, I thought he had no money, and so therefore maybe if he was completely on his uppers, maybe somebody should reach into their pocket and help, because I just think the British public, actually, if something happened to him, it would be so awful. If Diana's son, she obviously died tragically, if something were to happen to him, I think maybe the British public would never forgive themselves. Dare I say it? I know I'm going to get trolled just for saying that. But now I realise he's got lots and lots of money and he can fly by private jet and he's bought a ginormous house, apparently. Maybe I'm thinking, well, can't he just carry on what he's done all along, which is pay for his own security? And the other thing is, I think if anyone was to pay for it, is there not some sort of fund elsewhere, maybe his relatives, maybe the Spencers, who could pay for it if he needed help one day, rather than the British taxpayer? Because I think it'd be too much of a bitter pill to swallow for the British taxpayer to pay for it.
OK. One of the big issues that we need to try and get some meat on the bones of, if you like, is where they're going to end up living. And you've done some terrific work here. I think it's a Charlotte Griffiths exclusive, editor-at-large on the Mail on Sunday. We can reveal here on Talk. Where are they going to end up living?
Well, we have to be so careful not to say exactly where they're living, but I suppose the exclusive is that, you know, this rumour that they may live on a small farmhouse on the Spencer estate, or they might be renting somewhere because they've got no money, it appears to be incorrect, because what I am told is that the property they've looked at, or the properties they've been looking at, are north of 10 million. The one that I think I've identified, I actually can't say, because they issued a really, really strong warning, which I must adhere to. Yeah. So we can't name the location. But suffice to say, it is, as you'd expect, you know, it's incredibly luxurious. It's definitely got a kind of LA whiff to it. I have to be so careful not to identify it. But just, I found it very interesting that it's not some sort of dilapidated farmhouse, which at one point was the narrative, that they'd run out of money and they were coming back. It seems that is not the case. You know, the property is extremely expensive.
OK, a final question on this, and I'm not going to ask you to reveal the location, but if you've got a sense of it and you've seen the property and it's not a dilapidated farmhouse, would you say it's a classy gaff, or would you say it's a bit naff?
Ooh, I think, in my personal taste, listen, I wouldn't say no. If somebody handed me this house on a plate, I'd say yes. I think it's a little bit naff. There are two sides to the Cotswolds, you see. There's the very posh sides. You know, there's lots of posh people and they're real kind of crumbling, stately homes. And then there's the more modern kind of nouveau riche side. And I suppose it probably has a bit of a flavour to that nouveau riche in its decor anyway.
All right, Charlotte, great having you on as always. Charlotte Griffiths, editor-at-large of the Mail on Sunday. Thank you for joining us on Talk on this Thursday evening. Let's get back to this issue about who should fork out for Harry and Meghan's security. 0344 499 1000. Load of messages coming in regarding this. But first, let's take a voice note. This is Rob.
Good evening. Why should we look after Harry and Meghan when they come across to this country? He made his own and she made her own conscious decisions to go to America and stuck their fingers up at us. That's the royal family and the British public, and said, you know, we can do without you. We can make it on our own. What I don't really want as a British person to actually have anything to do with them, and I certainly don't want my money to go towards them for their security. They have their own lives and they need to stand on their own 2 feet, and if they can't do that, then they better go and find another country that actually feels better about them than actually the UK does, because I think most people wish he hadn't come back. Cheers, Robin, Cambridgeshire. Bye.
All right, Rob, appreciate you very much. Thank you for getting in contact with your voice note. 0344 499 1000 if you'd like to do the same. I'm just chewing over some of the things that Charlotte said in our chat a few moments ago. This idea about the audience, people in this country would struggle to forgive themselves if something happened to Harry. Does that carry weight with you? Because I still have part of my brain here, all right, and you can have a pop at me if you want, but I think it's a legitimate point to raise, which is, we know this man admitted to killing a number of the Taliban when he served, right, and he served in the armed forces. That was in his book Spare. Whether or not he was right to actually put that into print, you know, is entirely up to you to decide. But on that basis, for some people, he will be a target. And if, heaven forbid, something were to happen to him, would you struggle to forgive yourself because you went, we're not paying for his security? 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your WhatsApp messages and your voice notes. Loads of messages coming in. This is Andrew in Herne Hill. Are you the Andrew I used to talk to when I used to do late-night radio on various stations around London over the years? He says, Duncan, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle do not deserve the attention the media is giving them, so please stop talking about them. Why don't they deserve it? This is a fantastic story. We need to work out here in the UK what, if anything, we are prepared to do to support them. Andrew, thank you. This is Robin, who says, I care not for Harry and even less for his wife, but they must be protected in our United Kingdom. For us, we, the citizens of the country, because if the worst happened to him or his family at the hands of the maniac terrorists, then all hell would break loose. There'd be repercussions, and not just in the UK. Our country is already at boiling point over the activities of foreign-born people and the invaders, says Robin. And this is Ernie, who says, Duncan, how about Tony Blair paying for Harry's security? After all, it was him that put a target on Harry's back against the will of most of British taxpayers. Why should we pay? 0344 499 1000 for your message. Voice note me to that number, or call me and we'll chew it over on this Thursday evening here at Talk. Right, you won't see them, but off screen at the moment we have a team of people assembling a desk. It is the debate desk that we often have here on the Evening Exchange here at Talk, and populating the debate desk in a matter of moments, a couple of titans of political debate will welcome into the Talk studio James Hodgkinson, Research Associate at the Adam Smith Institute, and also Leo Watson, political commentator. They're here next at Talk.
go to Calais train station?
Yes, train station.
Okay. I was gipping. It was brutal. Come on, guys! Ready, full touch, go on! And we're on the way over to UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thursday evening, this is Talk. I'm Duncan Barkes in for Peter Cardwell through until 10 o'clock tonight here on the home of common sense. Let's welcome into our studio and straddling the debate desk we have, sorry, that's a mental image which I don't think anyone really wants. Wasn't the best choice of words. James Hodgkinson, Research Associate at the Adam Smith Institute. Good to see you again.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming in. And Leo Watson, first time you and I have met, so good to meet you.
It is, good to meet you too.
Political commentator here through until 8 to chew over some of the big stories of the day. We're going to have to start with Harry and Meghan. Their return to the United Kingdom 6 years after what one tabloid newspaper described as Megxit. And one of the things we're chewing over this evening is who should fork out for their security. They reckon, you know, it's estimated about £5 million a year if the taxpayer was going to pay for it. Though we had Charlotte Griffiths on earlier from the Mail on Sunday saying, look, you know, clearly they're not broke. They flew into the country yesterday on a private jet that cost 90 grand, and she's not allowed to say because the media has been told they can't do it. But she's seen details of where they're going to live, and it's a pretty nice gaff. Certainly out of the reach of anyone in this studio. So let's pick this over. First off, and Leah, I'll start with you if I may. I mean, Harry and Meghan returning to the UK, certainly the sense of Talk viewers and listeners is they don't want them here. They don't really want to support them. What's your view?
Well, as a massive Republican, I don't want any of them
here,
to be quite frank. So, yeah, for once, I think I agree with the Talk TV viewers. I mean, I wouldn't pay for any of the royal family's protections. And I think, you know, what Daddy's estimated to be worth up to 1.8 bill. The Crown Estate is estimated to be worth 15 bill. Maybe Daddy could sell off a tiny little bit of that. Or we could go and ask Christopher Harborne if he's got an extra 5 mil knocking around every year as well. I hear he's quite generous. So
right. Just out of interest, what fuels your republicanism? Is that a word?
I'm an egalitarian by birth. Everyone's born equal, but actually, if you have a royal family, it tells everybody right from the start of their lives, the whole nation, some people are just born better than you, and I hate it.
Yeah, no, I get that. But, I mean, the alternative is we end up with, what, a presidential system, and we would have ended up with people like Tony Blair or Boris Johnson as president. That would have been a car crash.
But if you knock out the royal family, it doesn't make any difference to how we run our state. It really doesn't. You just get rid of them. It's not like they're actually signing bills properly anymore. It's not like they have any say in that. Well, Charles will do his best to have some say in that because he skirts all of our conventions and all of our unwritten constitution. So just get rid of them. It won't make no difference.
I don't want this to turn into a debate about whether or not we should be a republic. It's my fault for asking the question, but I'm always curious as to what fuels that view. James, Harry and Meghan back in the UK, is that a good thing?
I'm honestly fed up with them. To me, it seems like they want to be the centre of attention, and when they're not, they make...
All right, I'm just going to stop the show for a second. Hang on a second. Can we just get someone on the air who's glad to have them back at some point between now and 10? Because
do you want me to pretend,
we ought to... I know it'll be like a needle in a haystack, but let's try. 0344 499 1000. If you're over the moon and you put out the bunting because Harry and Meghan have returned to the UK. Sorry, James, I interrupted you. You don't like them?
No. Reports say that she was keen to return because of this commercial opportunity, this acting opportunity that opened up in The Gentleman. The Guardian were reporting that that's now gone away. But at the end of the day, it was a commercial decision, and so all of the implications that come with it should be shouldered, in my view, by Harry and Meghan. When you look at non-working royals and the conventions that we have in Britain, we do have a situation where people like Zara Tindall, who are prominent, who do feature in our public life, don't get taxpayer-funded security. In my view, the royal family tend to get public relations and comms right. They're masters of it. I'm sure they know where the public is on this, and I hope they don't make a grave error.
Is there any argument, and I was floating this earlier because I was driving in, and part of it's about 10% of my thinking regarding this is along the lines, and I mentioned it earlier to Charlotte Griffiths from the Mail on Sunday, and I mentioned it to you guys as well, that you know, he's not just a royal, he also served overseas. You know, he admitted, if you want to use that term, in his book, his ghastly book, Spare, that, you know, he took out 20 to 25 Taliban. That, for some people, makes him a legitimate target. On that basis, and let's be honest, we live in a country full of nutters who, you know, I believe would think, oh, well, he's back here, let's have a pop at him because, you know, he's part of a war that I disagree with for either ideological or religious reasons. Is there any argument, Leo, to say on that basis we should maybe take his security needs more seriously?
No, he can afford it, his family can afford it, they should pay for it. It's as simple as that, really. And we let some of our veterans sleep homeless, so, you know.
OK, fair point. James?
At the end of the day, we're in a situation where we do have nutters, as you say. The terrible murder of Anne Widdecombe comes to mind. We do have to consider that there are children involved here as well, children who know nothing about what happened, and they need to be safeguarded. But in my view, the royal family can look after this themselves. They've got estates that have security. I'm sure Harry and Meghan, if they really wanted it, could be found a nice little 2 up, 2 down in one of those estates where they could be safe and secure.
One of Prince Andrew's, maybe. Oh, sorry, Andrew's, my bad.
Leo, stop nicking my lines. Where do you think this is going to end up, Leo? I mean, their return to the UK, I mean, and this is a bit of a crystal ball gazing, but are they here long term, do you think? Have they just popped over because they want to get their kids into a British school? I mean, do you ever think the people of the United Kingdom will ever hold them close to their bosom ever again?
I don't know.
Can time be the healer?
I suspect when there's a divorce that at some point people will take Harry back into their warm bosom, but until then, I couldn't care less, frankly.
What about you, James?
Well, you have to consider that Camilla was dreadfully unpopular, and she successfully revived her public image. I mean, Harry's got an awful lot of work to do, but at the end of the day, I think, as Leo says, in its current form, I can't see this situation resolving on its own. OK, we found someone. This is Rosalind. It says Rosalind Hatfield. I don't know if Rosalind's in Hatfield or that's a surname. It's a perfectly good surname. Glad they are back, but I have to go now as nurse is here with my medication. You see, I got so excited there. One here from Les in Cheshire. If Harry and Meghan deserve protection from radicals, then surely so should our elected politicians, especially those representing reform. You've opened a bag of words here, my friend. Well, thank you, Les, because that's kind of my job. But, I mean, for the record, I do believe that MPs need greater security because I think now we live in such an explosive climate for all kinds of reasons, predominantly started with Brexit, but it's got worse. I believe that we should give our MPs security round the clock because there are some very peculiar people in this country today. Let's pause on this. We'll come back in a few moments' time and we'll talk about the UK benefits system off the back of comments made by the Work and Pensions Secretary. Of course, his name is Pat McFadden. He says the UK's benefit system is flawed and leaves people written off from work. Question is, what the hell do we do about it? We'll get to it next, here at Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thursday evening, just turned 7:30. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Duncan Barkes. Listen, if you hear anything you want to pick up on here, do give us a shout. 0344 499 1000, talking about who should be funding Harry and Meghan's security. And also, where do you think all of this ends regarding these two back in the United Kingdom? Happy to take your calls on this. Also, your WhatsApp messages. I'll read them out and we'll play out your voice notes as you've been hearing. 0344 499 1000. And if you're a little bit old school, you can text, start your message with the word Talk and send it to 87222. Our debate desk continues here at Talk. James Hodgkinson, Research Associate at the Adam Smith Institute, and Leo Watson, political commentator, alongside me in the studio through until 8. Let's look at these comments made by Pat McFadden. He's the Work and Pensions Secretary. He's saying that Britain's benefit system is flawed and leaves people written off from work. He also said Britain's main unemployment benefit, universal credit, was too black and white and caused many people to be signed off work indefinitely. He went on to say there's a design flaw in the universal credit system, which is too readily separates people into fit for work and unfit for work, and when they are unfit for work, leaves them without any support or any conditions. He went on to say, I think that distinction is too black and white in the system as it stands. It's something that I think they need to change. Other stuff here relevant to this conversation. Official figures show there were 8.4 million people on universal credit in May of this year. Of these, 4.27 million had no requirement to look for work. And the reports are saying it marks a dramatic rise from a year earlier when 3.5 million people were claiming universal credit and were signed off work indefinitely. James, how much of a problem do you think this is?
Well, I will agree with the Work and Pensions Secretary on this one. I think it's a right and proper diagnosis, but with the data, I think it's the only conclusion that was really possible to come to. Earlier this year, we crossed 1 million youngsters who were not in employment, education or training for the first time in a decade. I should say that that's now dropped to just below the million mark. It has today, but it's still very, very high. And youth unemployment is at its highest level for a decade. In terms of universal credit itself, as you say, half of people on universal credit have no requirement to work at all, and it's a system of incentives because in many cases people are dissuaded from finding sort of small amounts of part-time work because it might affect their ability to claim other benefits. In my view, the situation is untenable. The welfare bill is expected to increase by £50 billion by the end of the decade, and to be frank, that is money Britain does not have. I want a system that helps the most vulnerable. I want a system that's there for the long term to support those who really need it, and so we need reform. We need it on moderate, sensible terms, and we need it now. Otherwise, we're going to be even worse off in the long run.
Leo, we can't afford to carry on forking out this amount of cash, can we?
No, I don't think we can. But I think if the diagnosis of Pat McFadden is to say that we need to be dragging people with progressive conditions like Parkinson's, MND, multiple sclerosis in front of reassessors to say and poke them and prod them and say, are you really still unfit for work? So are you really still unfit? Then no, I think that's an abhorrent system. And I think if you want to look at reforming the welfare budget in the system, look no further than the triple lock as well. Let's not pretend that's almost the majority of what we spend. So the triple lock
I've
has
just
been
got to warn
reformed
you,
for 15
Leo.
years.
I've just got to warn you. I did a show yesterday, which was 3 hours on whether or not the triple lock should be scrapped, and I've still got PTSD off the back of it. I mean, our audience.
Sorry, I didn't mean to bring that back up.
No, it's fine. You just opened a scar.
You should go off work and take some time off.
I'm a freelance. It's the greatest incentive to not working, to not work. But I understand why you brought up the triple lock. But let's just bring it back to this because I mean these figures, and you're right. You know, if someone's got Parkinson's, with the greatest of respect, they're not going to get better, right? So the idea that you reassess them or they get assessed every 6 months or a year is for the birds. But the figures here, I mean, 4.27 million people had no requirement to look for work. I mean, it is unsustainable.
But a lot of those people have got long-term health conditions. You say it's for the birds. Actually, I think it was only for like a couple of years ago they were actually doing that. I think they'll probably try and bring it back in to claw some money back and get the sort of money-hungry outsourced assessors to say, oh yeah, make sure they don't get through this time, make sure they can only walk 20 metres instead of 50 metres. That is
well,
just
how do you make it fairer, though? How do you make it fairer? How would you reform the welfare system so it's fair, and the people that you've just discussed rightly get the support they need, but those who might not have those conditions, and to be blunt, some people who are swinging the lead, and I think we can agree there are people who take the mick, right?
There always will be. Yeah.
So how do you sort that out?
Well, I think there's a holistic way of looking at it. I think the healthcare system's got to be involved. I think you go to your GP, you say you're under a little bit of stress, you're under a little bit of pressure, and you're going there legitimately for help. I want to make that very clear. And they will say, how long do you want to be signed off for? I think in the first instance, let's do 2 weeks, let's do a month. I think that is a massive part of this problem. It's a culture of course, you're under a bit of pressure, take some time off. So I'd take a look at that.
Do we need to, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but both of you, do we need to look at what actually defines you're under a bit of pressure? Because, look, I come from a generation, I'm older than you two, right? I'm Generation X.
Really?
Yeah. Well, how old are you?
Older than him.
Right. You're not in your 50s, are you?
Not quite.
Are you in your 40s?
No.
No, you see, so I'm older than both of you.
I'm a great Nick.
Yeah, you are, you're looking good. All right, so I'm Generation X, and to be blunt, we're bloody hard, right? You know, get to bed at 4 in the morning, get up at 6, hangover, Burger King, Coca-Cola, couple of UFN, crack on. That's the world that we were brought up in. I mean, you can probably tell by looking at me. I haven't worn it that well. But I'm making a point because there is, I think, a view out there that generations younger than me perhaps are not as... perhaps get more rattled with everyday life. So the idea that you go to a GP and say, I'm under a bit of pressure, some of us might be going, well, yeah, well, life is pressure, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, do we not have to look at what defines going to your GP and saying, I'm a little bit stressed today?
I think older generations have dealt with anxiety and stress awfully. Male suicide is incredibly high.
Yep.
I think if someone feels like they have a problem, they should have the right and the freedom to go and find healthcare for that. And when they go, it should be dealt with not just as a tick box where they've come and said they're a little bit stressed, so therefore I'm going to wipe them off. Because the second you take time off, it's harder to get back into the workforce. And also, you know, in terms of solving this problem as well, I'd reinvest a lot of the money we're spending on youth unemployment that we're handing out in benefits into schemes to get people back into work. The government has started to do that, but we're in the foothills, I think, of what is possible.
OK, James, how do we make the benefits system in Britain better?
Well, look, I am a big advocate of the value of work. I really think that getting people back into employment is the way that we sort this out, and we need to be really truthful here about why we're in this situation. The youth minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds has gone up by 26% in the last 2 years alone. I know because I've got friends who work those jobs. They're in positions where they have fewer hours now than they had before 2024, and they're in a worse financial position. So let's start there. I get the value
Well, hang on, when you say start there, what would you do with it?
Well, I'd drop the minimum wage back to what it was 2 years ago.
During the cost of living crisis?
I would, because I think...
How does that work?
At the end of the day... It does, because at the end of the day, we're in a situation now where people my age are on their knees because they cannot find work. If I had to take a 26% pay cut tomorrow to make sure someone else could have a job, I would do it.
If businesses aren't paying enough to keep people on the breadline...
Businesses are closing every day.
Then those businesses need to close. You're a neoliberal, right? Those businesses are not functional. They cannot operate in our society under the rules that we set, which is literal breadline rules. No, get rid of them. Good riddance. See you later. Pay young people more, not less.
Wow. At the end of the day...
Whoa, hang on a second. So if I've understood you correctly, Leo, and I think James is right, you know, in the last couple of years, and it was Rachel Reeves, when she was Chancellor, increased the minimum wage, and you can argue, depending on where you sit politically, that is a good thing. People should earn more money if they can. However, when it goes past a point where businesses are going, I can't afford to employ people, and then you have the increase in employers' national insurance contributions that also was brought in under Rachel Reeves, and you see businesses going, I can't afford to employ people. Then you've got the Employment Rights Bill that is a little bit more bureaucratic than what existed before, and I'm being kind by saying that. And you've got businesses going, I can't make any money out of this, what's the point? You believe those businesses deserve to close?
I think
that's an extraordinary thing to say.
I think the national insurance rise is completely the wrong thing to do. It's weak politics. It's been weak politics for 20 years, saying income tax should never go up.
Right.
Tax on income should go up without a
that would have broken the manifesto pledge, wouldn't it?
There shouldn't have been a manifesto pledge. There shouldn't have been a pledge of Camerons. It shouldn't have been a pledge of successive governments. Right. It needs to go up. Stop putting up taxes on business. And by the way, national insurance for people is a regressive tax because it's a flat rate, so it's absolutely ridiculous.
But Leo, if we continue down this path, we're not going to have any businesses left.
The businesses that cannot afford to keep people on the breadline by paying the minimum wage, which goes up 20p every so often, they don't deserve to exist.
They don't deserve to exist.
They don't deserve... They cannot operate in our
hang on a
functioning
second.
society.
Hang on. This is absurd. How do you get growth in the economy then? Because it's the private sector that... Don't look at me like that. It's the private sector that delivers growth. Sorry, I'm not going to hit you. But I might. It's the private sector that delivers growth. It's not the public sector. It's not the government. It's the private sector. But without those small to medium-sized businesses, that's never going to happen. And you're quite happy for them to go to the wall.
Well, apparently you're saying we should be subsidising private businesses. How does that work?
I'm not saying that they should be subsidised. I'm just saying that...
If we're lowering the national minimum wage, we're subsidising businesses that cannot function.
Go on, James, make a point.
Let me be clear, that is fantasy economics. The way that we take this system, we're in a position now where the rate of business formation is at its lowest level since records began in 2017. You say that businesses don't deserve to exist. I say business owners deserve the right to invest their capital in their communities. I say people deserve the chance to have a summer job. I say people deserve the chance to work a shift down their local pub. And it's this rhetoric, precisely this rhetoric, that robs people of those opportunities.
A fair wage and decent condition robs people of opportunities. Well, you heard it there first.
Where's the growth going to come from?
We are literally subsidising businesses that can't afford to function
that wasn't my question. Where's the growth going to come from? Where's our economic growth going to come from?
Where's it coming from right now?
Well, it's not happening, is it?
Exactly.
Yeah,
because businesses are closing day by day.
And young people are completely out of work. And I don't
because they've been priced out of the labour market.
No, they haven't been priced out of the labour market. Businesses will rather give their fat cat shareholders more of the profit than reinvest it into community.
I don't think the local pub has fat cat shareholders, and I think you know that full well.
What, you mean, like the Fullers of this world? Behave yourself. Like, there are some independent pubs.
What about a seaside...
You're trying to say, like, the massive Fullers, the Heinekens of this world, they don't have fat cats. Leo, they don't have any shareholders.
Leo, it is the usual argument people trot out about these multi-corporate organisations with shareholders. What about Doris, who runs a seaside cafe in a seaside resort somewhere in northeast England, who doesn't have shareholders?
And don't put up a national insurance.
So, right.
I completely agree.
So we have two-tier tax again?
Really? No, we put up people's income tax so you can actually give businesses a fair chance.
Two-tier tax again, two-tier Britain again. We've been here, it doesn't work.
All right, let's bring it back to... I'm enjoying this. Let's bring it back to the benefit system, because that's what kicked off this, some might say, argument this evening at Talk. How far do you go with reforming it? Because I'm old enough to remember various prime ministers and governments trying to reform benefits in the welfare state in this country. Frank Field, famously MP for Birkenhead, Labour MP, was asked to think the unthinkable by Tony Blair, and he did. And Tony Blair didn't like what Frank Field said. And we know there's not votes, many votes, necessarily, if you're quite radical with restricting particularly benefits for those who are unable to work. So how do we do it? How do we do it fairly, James?
Well, I'm going to agree with something that Leo said earlier. After all of that, I'm going to come back to agreement and say that we do need to look at the triple lock, I'm afraid, because it is a vast proportion of our benefits bill. My prediction is at some point in the next 20 years, it will happen. I think if we do it early, we start early, we can be far fairer, we can deliver something more sustainable, but whether people have the political will to deal with that, we will see.
But James, no political party's got the balls to do it. I mean, Reformers said they're going to keep the triple lock. The Tories have said they're going to keep the triple lock. I mean, certainly the Conservative Party have to do that to hold on to their older voters. Reform have to do that a little bit for their older vote. I don't think Burnham's got the backbone to say we need to get rid of the triple lock. And this is the other thing about it as well, which is quite interesting. And we discovered this yesterday when we talked about it for 3 hours on this platform here at Talk, which is this idea that, understandably, people get emotional about the triple lock. And it's like, well, we should scrap it. It doesn't mean you can't still have a system where the pension increases pegged to something like the rate of inflation. Precisely. It doesn't have to be across the three benchmarks, does it?
Well, I wouldn't want to let pensioners be left out to the wolves. That's the last thing I want to do.
Yeah.
These are people who have contributed to our society, as young people will do if we give them the opportunity to work.
Right.
But these are people that have contributed. They deserve to have some form of protection going into their old age. But we've got to be frank with people. We've got to be honest, because the system we've got at the moment means that when Leo and I get there, there's going to be nothing left for us.
All right, we're going to continue this because some great messages are coming in.
I bet everyone's loving what I'm saying, right?
Well, yeah, there's... No, not really. Not at all. We'll get to those in a few moments' time, and we'll continue with our debate desk. You want to get involved, 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk.
Go to Calais train station?
Yes, train station.
Okay. I was gaping. It was brutal. Come on, guys! Ready, full touch, go on! And we're on the way over to UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thursday evening, 10 to 8, I'm Duncan Barkes. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Our debate desk rages on with James Hodgkinson, Research Associate at the Adam Smith Institute, also Leo Watson, political commentator. If you just put us on YouTube or you're listening on your smart speaker or your DAB digital radio, we've been chewing over what we do with the benefit system in this country off the back of the comments made by the Work and Pension Secretary, Pat McFadden. And we started off debating why we have 8.4 million people on universal credit as of May this year, and 4.27 million of these people had no requirement to look for work. We then rather quickly moved on about the state of the private sector and running a business and people not being able to find work if they're certainly a lot younger than me. We got a load of messages coming in. As always, gentlemen, don't take it personally. Catherine in Cardiff says, could you please explain to Leo that the customers of businesses will only pay a certain price for their products or services? When the footfall disappears, the businesses will go to the wall. I'm guessing you wouldn't have a problem with that, given what you said earlier. They can close down. Well,
they're protected. They're putting up the prices to protect their margin to give their shareholders mostly, so it's fine.
Yeah, what if they don't have shareholders? Can we move on from the shareholders argument?
Yeah, that's my best side of my argument.
You keep neglecting my friend Doris, who's running a cafe in a seaside town in northeast England, don't you?
She's on the take, I know her.
Martin says the debate desk has a reputation for spotlighting low IQ, low intelligence lefties, but tonight the barrel has been scraped. Who is this fool? Well, Martin, he's not a fool. He's just got a view that you disagree with, James disagrees with, and I disagree with.
I'm sure someone agrees somewhere.
It doesn't make him foolish.
Mum, can you text in?
A couple more here. This is Sue's. Oh, here we go. The triple lock. The triple lock was £10 per week on a state pension of £12,500, 4.7%. My energy bill has tripled. My council tax went up by 5%. Food bills have doubled. Meanwhile, universal credit went up 6%. Some single 20-year-olds who have never worked are on up to 26 grand a year. Tax-free and exempt from council tax. Those businesses that your loony guest, I think that's you, things should close, pay taxes and have the potential to grow. Who is this mad person? Leo, you want to reply to that?
Did they pay taxes? Really? Good one. Food's gone up. How do you get your food from just the greengrocer who's obviously not paying anything to your shareholders? Like, what are you on about? Did we not privatise the energy sector as well? Come on, I think we know where the money's going, guys. Go wake up.
Right, let's move on to this this headline here. The number of foreign criminals on Britain's streets who are subject to deportation has jumped by more than 2,000 in a year. These are official figures from the Home Office, show that 21,294 foreign national offenders were living free in the community in the year up to June 2026. That's up from 18,993 a year earlier. The increase was blamed on the impact of Labour's Sentencing Act, which has seen thousands of criminals released early under a bid to combat prison overcrowding. And the figure here says the number of foreign criminals awaiting deportation stood at 17,677 at the time of the general election. Today's figures reveal the number of asylum seekers living outside hotels has exceeded 73,000. So the headline here that has exercised quite a few commentators is that the number of foreign criminals on Britain's streets who should be deported has reached record levels. falls as the amount of migrants applying to settle in the UK hits a 16-year high. James, I'll start with you. Your reaction to this story?
Well, it's obviously concerning. It's a large number of offenders, and for communities in which they are residing, it must be really, really deeply unsettling. But at the end of the day, this comes down to capacity. It comes down to our criminal justice system. Successive governments for years, decades, have talked tough on crime, and they've not backed that up with building the prison places we need. Between 2010 and 2024, we just created 500 prison places net. Labour have said they've built 3,000 so far, but that isn't the net number. I don't have the net number. And so, of course, this sort of thing is going to happen. At the end of the day, though, it is worth providing some nuance, which is that the use of asylum hotels today, down 50%, asylum claims down, legal migration applications down too, which is a good thing if you want to stop the boats. It's a good thing if you want to control migration, but there is work to do.
So how far would you go? Would you say that this Labour government, and particularly the last 4 weeks of Andy Burnham, have finally got a grip on the situation?
I wouldn't say that at all.
No?
What I would say is that they have made a start. It's very easy to cut numbers on a large scale when the numbers are as bad as they were under Keir Starmer. The point is that 16,000 people this year have made that journey. That's 16,000 too many. And just to make a wider point, we've spent years, successive governments using legal and illegal migration, they've spent years propping up a failed economic system. If this is the route that the electorate want to go down, if this is the route that people want to go down and how they want to vote, then there's going to have to be a point of reckoning, because we can't afford to be spending like we are if we're not going to have young people coming into the economy. There's two options. You either cut spending or you encourage people who live in Britain to have more kids.
Leo, your thoughts?
I mean, you mentioned the years 2010 to 2024. I mean, I wonder who was in charge during that period of time. The Tories lost control of the asylum system. They lied to us about Brexit, because what they did is actually just stop EU migrants coming in, but let non-EU migrants coming in. The Boris wave peaked at almost a million net migration, which is absolutely scandalous. And basically, if the Tories didn't hand over a prison system that was 99.2% full in terms of male prisons when they left power in 2024, these criminals wouldn't be walking our streets. They'd be in the prisons, and then they'd be safely deported without ever hitting our streets. They break it, we fix it, always has been, forever will be.
What about the spending issue around this? Because James mentioned that we can't carry on spending the sheer amount of money as a country that we are. Our national debt, if you believe the OBR, is nudging £3 trillion. If you go beyond the OBR, who don't include in their figures the commitment to PFI funding over the many, many years, something started by John Major, continued under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, etc. Also the liability for public sector pensions. There's a view that that £3 trillion runs into double figures. And I'm just keen to broaden this out a little bit in the final few minutes of our debate desk about where you think we're heading, Leo, in terms of spending. Because I think the Labour Party's in a really interesting position. You've got that manifesto commitment, and you did say earlier, quite rightly, that you don't, well, you said, and tell me if I misquoted you here, that you don't think they should have pledged not to raise VAT, income tax, NI, etc. But they did. Burnham said he's going to keep to that. So we're either going to see tax increases on October the 28th, which is the date for the budget, or we're going to see more spending, or rather more borrowing, to fund spending commitments. At some point, someone's going to have to rein in the purse strings, aren't they?
We're going to see both, and we have to see both. And it's interesting, we talked about political cowardice a little bit earlier in the programme. I think the moment to change things like the triple lock, the moment to fundamentally change our system, was when Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves walked into Downing Street. They could have taken one look at the books and said, Sunak lied to you, he lied to you on prisons, he lied to you on the balance sheet. We have to take extraordinary action, and then let 5 years pass so that the public could see what would happen if we did that, the benefits and the flaws, and then make a decision. They left it too late. Andy Burnham now, with 3 years left to go to election and facing a hard right opposition in reform, he can't do those things. His hands are tied behind his back. So he will tax a bit more, he will spend a bit more, because that is his politics, and that is, his aspirational socialism. And I think he should, because the only way, like we were talking about business earlier, the only way to get growth is to invest. And if we don't invest in our public services, we can't grow anywhere.
James?
At the end of the day, we're in a situation where we have a large Labour Party, who were parliamentary Labour Party, that is, who were elected on wafer-thin margins. You say Starmer had an opportunity to do something radical. He did, he tried, and he nearly got brought back down by his own radical left-wing backbenchers. So we've been
well,
there.
that is an interesting point. I mean, you know, Reeves and Starmer tried to shave off about $5 billion of welfare, and there were about, I think it was 100 Labour MPs who kicked off about it, and in the end he backed down. Isn't that part of the problem here, that actually there are some Labour MPs who simply do not understand the financial crisis that I believe we are heading towards if we carry on borrowing at the rate we are?
I disagree. He didn't win that vote, and I could see him not winning that vote a million miles away because they put in no time. They were arrogant about their majority. He thought he was a presidential prime minister, completely misread the situation. Hundreds of Labour MPs like me have been campaigning a lot of their lives to ensure that people who are in desperate need of welfare, with people with long-term conditions, get it, and he didn't put in the time and he lost the vote. Andy Burnham, had he been in power, had he been our Prime Minister at that point, he would never have lost the vote like that. And by the way, he is going to get the welfare bill down, and he'll get it through because he's taking time to win the hearts and minds of his MPs. It's completely on Starmer's desk, this, completely.
And you can argue, actually, he's a more charismatic communicator compared to Keir Starmer, though equally the bar was quite low. Listen, gentlemen, thank you. It's been a great hour. Leo Watson, political commentator, James Hodgkinson, research associate at the Adam Smith Institute. Thank you both. Have a great Thursday evening. 0344 499 1000 is our number. Keen to carry on getting your calls, your messages and your voice notes regarding who should pay for Harry and Meghan's security, and also how do we make Britain's benefit system better for the future. 0344 499 1000. Give us a call as the evening exchange continues.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thursday evening, I'm Duncan Barkes. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Good to have you along. Get involved wherever you might be listening, on DAB, digital radio, on your smart speaker, maybe even streaming on YouTube. Get in contact, 0344 499 1000. You can call that number. Do you know what we can do? We can have a good old-fashioned conversation like we used to in the old days on the telephone. We can do that. I'm a good listener. I'm a good talker. 0344 499 1000. If that's not your particular, if that's not your boulevard, does that make sense? You can send a WhatsApp to that number, 0344 499 1000, or send a voice note, and I promise I will play them out between now and 10. Ton of stuff going on here. We're talking about Harry and Meghan. Some great reaction to the conversation we had earlier with Charlotte Griffiths, editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, about their new gaffe. If you missed it, check it out on our YouTube channel. She was rather polite when I asked her whether or not it was quite classy or a little bit naff. Check it out. We're also talking about who should pay for their security. You got a view on that? I mean, they reckon it's £5 million a year if the taxpayer was going to fund it. I do find myself occasionally thinking that given the fact that he's a high-profile target, having served in the armed forces and admitting killing a number of the Taliban, that maybe there's an onus of responsibility on you and I to fork out for it. But I'm happy to have the conversation, which is the opposite of that, because it goes against every bone in my body to say that we should pay for their security. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We'll get into that again later this hour. But let's return our focus on the UK's benefit system, Britain's benefit system. How do we make it fit for the future? How do we make it better? I'm very aware whenever we have this particular kind of chat here on Talk, it's very easy to talk about the benefit system and say, well, I've heard this, I've heard that. I'm a big believer when it comes to journalism of getting real life experiences on the air. So if you've got a next door neighbour who you know has been swinging the lead, we need to hear about it tonight. 0344 499 1000. Equally, if you're someone who thinks that people on benefits get an unfair hard time on the media, we should talk about that as well, because I think that's really important. What's kicked off this particular conversation tonight here on Talk are the comments of Pat McFadden. Now, he's the Work and Pensions Secretary. He's been out and about today. He was at the headquarters of Boots in Nottingham as the first wave of young people to qualify for the government's Jobs Guarantee Programme, which encourages employers to hire youth workers started in their new roles. And whenever this kind of stuff happens, you get a senior politician doing this, the media turn up and they ask questions. And he was asked a question about our benefit system here in the UK. And he said Britain's benefit system is flawed and leaves people written off from work. He went on to say Britain's main unemployment benefit, which is universal credit, was too black and white and caused many people to be signed off from work indefinitely. He went on to say there's a design flaw in the universal credit system, which too readily separates people into fit for work and unfit for work, and when they are unfit for work, it leaves them without any support or any conditions. He said, I think that distinction is too black and white in the system as it stands. It's something that I think they need to change. And just if you weren't listening earlier, the numbers that we're talking about here, official government figures show that 8.4 million people on universal credit in May of this year, that's the number. Of that 8.4 million, 4.27 million had no requirement to work, which I genuinely find staggering. We talked in the last hour that people have conditions like Parkinson's, and you can understand why, regardless of any future assessments or reassessments, they're not going to get better. So they're not going to be able to work. But this also includes people who say, I've got a mental health issue, I can't work. Well, I think that kind of stuff needs to be discussed at great length. Forecasts from the Office of Budget Responsibility, or for Budget Responsibility, show that welfare spending is estimated to rise, blimey, from £352.8 billion this financial year to £406.9 billion by 2030-2031. This is simply unsustainable. So what the heck are we going to do about it? Well, someone who's got some ideas is Anne Strickland, researcher at the Taxpayers Alliance. Good evening.
Hi.
Always a pleasure to talk to you and hear your thoughts. This is something that I think any taxpayer listening to Talk tonight or watching Talk tonight will just go, my money is just going down the drain, quite literally. What do we need to do about it, Anne?
Yeah, I mean, 400 billion
Yep.
by the end of this decade. It's a completely staggering figure, and it is taxpayers paying for all of that. And it's not just, you know, the cost to taxpayers of that 400 billion, but it's also all of these people whose lives, they're not working, they're not, you know, being productive with their lives, that's a waste too. They're not contributing towards the economy. And they are, you know, Pat McFadden is right in a way, they're being completely written off. So it is something that has to be addressed. It's nice to see Pat McFadden turn around and say, you know, the system's broken. It's something we've been saying for years.
Yeah.
Obviously, the system is broken. The system doesn't incentivise people to get into work, particularly when you have this expansion of welfare. When you get onto things like universal credit, it doesn't just allow you, you know, out of work benefits. It passports you into a whole range of different benefits and you know, perks of the system. For example, the story a few months ago, I'm sure you remember it, of people on universal credit getting cheaper access to tourist attractions.
Yeah, entry
right?
into leisure theme parks and that kind of stuff.
Obviously, a lot of that is not paid for by the taxpayer.
Yeah.
But it incentivises people to stay on universal credit because they're getting a better deal than hard-working families in this country.
Do you have faith that Pat McFadden, and I agree with you, it's interesting to hear him actually say this, do you have faith that he and the rest of his party really have the political will to change things?
Well, the Labour Party as a whole, it's tough to say. Obviously, when Keir Starmer was in charge, the rebellions that he faced trying to not even really cut welfare, just limit the increases to welfare, massive rebellions on that front.
100 Labour MPs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Andy Burnham seemed, at least for the beginning, seems to have more of a control over his party. It's tough to see where that will go. But it's nice to see Pat McFadden, even before being in Andy Burnham's cabinet, there was that story that came out a couple of months ago where transcripts of him saying, every single meeting I go into, it's who can we tax more to pay more out in benefits.
Yes.
And he said that in a negative way, obviously.
And we only discovered that, didn't we, because it was the leaked messages from to Peter Mandelson.
Absolutely.
The WhatsApp messages. And everyone, it almost confirmed what a lot of us suspected, which is Labour MPs are just in it to tax people until the pips not just squeak, but actually scream.
Absolutely, yeah. 100%. Yeah. I mean, the attitude of Labour as a whole to tax and tax and tax more and then pay out more in benefits is part of the reason that we're in this mess. I mean, the scheme that Pat McFadden and the Andy Burnham government have launched today, the Jobs Guarantee Scheme, is incentivising young people to get into work and helping employers support those young people into work. Now, the employers wouldn't need support if the Labour government hadn't increased the cost of employment for employers by the NI hike that they did 2 years ago. Obviously, employers don't want to hire people. Vacancies are at a year, they're at the lowest point for years. Of course people are going onto welfare because there aren't jobs available for them. They're not even trying now.
Yeah, this is the bit I don't understand, and the figures do speak for themselves. Since we had the increase in employers' national insurance, since we had the increase in the minimum wage, since Labour introduced the Employment Rights Bill, vacancies have dropped. Business leaders, both big and small, have said to local MPs and to the government and to the cabinet, do you know what? We're not hiring people because either it's now become with too much red tape or it's just more costly and we can't afford to do it. It's so obvious what is causing this, and you're absolutely right. If it was easier and cheaper to hire people, we wouldn't be discussing these figures today, would we?
No, of course not. Everything in the economy, it all works on incentives. And if you incentivise people to go on to benefits, if you disincentivise employers to hire people, you make it harder and more costly for employers to hire people. Of course they're not going to hire people. Of course people are going to say, OK, there's no jobs available for me. I'm going to take the easy route out. I'm going to go on to benefits. And what a world of opportunity this opens up for me, because not just I get benefits, I might get a car, I might get dentist, I'm going to get my prescriptions paid for, all of these other things.
Let me ask you about it in a bit more detail, because I think our viewers and listeners here at Talk would welcome you just going through in a little bit more detail the kind of other bits you can get once you're in the system, so they're fully aware. So you mentioned about getting a car. That's the Motability Scheme, right?
Yes, so that's enhanced mobility through PIP. And PIP, obviously, it's disability payment. That not everyone on universal credit will get that, but the increase of, I mean, this was a comment that Pat McFadden made today as part of his speech, was that when you get a mental health diagnosis, it's effectively a passport onto disability and welfare. Now, obviously, if you've got PIP, you get a Motability car. If you've got universal credit, you will get your prescriptions paid for, you will get access to the dentist, you will get easier access through to the NHS, things like that. You will get, as I said earlier, cheaper tickets to
access
go
to attractions and all kinds of things. Yeah.
I mean, you know, that would be great. I'm a young person in London. It'd be lovely to go and see some of these things.
Go to the Tower of London.
Go to the Tower of London dirt cheap.
You see, what's interesting about this, it does get us into this whole area where I think a lot of people find themselves thinking, I live in this two-tier Britain. And we talk about this a lot here on Talk. You know, we talk about two-tier policing and two-tier justice and stuff. But this gets us into this idea that those people who, and I've got to choose my words so carefully because I end up getting trolled by it on social media. Not that I care that much, but, you know, I'm not having a pop at people who've got genuine conditions. But once people are in this kind of system, and particularly if you talk about mental health stuff, which, you know, and that's almost, we could do another hour on this, you know, mental health conditions that, you know, I feel a bit stressed, so I need to be signed off work. Well, my generation, and I'm a hell of a lot older than you, you know, stress is part of work. You know, that's how we were brought up. And I'm not having a go at the younger generations, you know, millennials or Gen Z or whatever. But I think some of the mental health definitions or conditions, if you like, have perhaps come a little bit more to the fore, whereas actually you would just go, well, that's part of modern day life, right? But this whole area, and it's quite striking to hear what you said, this idea that some people just go, well, I can't get a job, I'll go on to universal credit. It opens up this whole world, right, and access to a range of benefits. And fundamentally, it's just letting this country down.
Yeah. I mean, one of the really shocking stats to me is that 7 in 10 young people on disability and health benefits will stay on it for 10 years. Yeah. We don't have data past that 10-year point, so chances are they will stay on it for even longer than 10 years. Yeah. But 70% of young people on health benefits are going to stay on it for 10 years. And a lot of those young people, it's health conditions like anxiety, depression, autism, and these are like particularly with mental health conditions. Obviously, there are some mental health conditions that are so severe that you cannot work, of course. But the majority of these are not that case. And so it's incentivizing people to get into work, giving them a purpose, giving them something to do with their time. If you're sat at home all day, every day, you're not going out and socializing, you're not feeling like you have a purpose, of course your mental health is going to get worse.
I can see how quickly you would spiral, given that particular scenario. So let's talk about what may or may not be the solution here. And I'm very aware, and you've been very good to and you flagged it up, you know, there's some mental health conditions that, you know, some people will never, I was just going to use the phrase beyond repair in some cases, and we acknowledge that, and that's fair. But we can't carry on paying out what we're paying as part of our benefit system, particularly sickness benefits. How do we fix it? How do we make the system fairer and fitter for the future?
Well, I think some of the solutions, obviously post-COVID, in-person assessments are basically non-existent. Bringing back in-person assessments, it's something that should have been done immediately after the COVID lockdowns ended. It's not something that we did because civil servants, public sector workers like to take the easy route out. Of course they do.
Well, a lot of them are still working from home.
So, a lot of them are still working from home. Them going into the office to assess people. It's a burden for them too. But getting those in-person assessments back, but also for disability benefits, looking at means testing it, the amount of sort of middle-class earners having, middle-class families having disability benefits, okay, they might still have that disability, but do they need the same level of provision that a, you know, minimum wage family might need? It's looking where we can structure the system to really give the help to the people that really genuinely need it, and if you don't genuinely need it, we can't afford to pay it.
So means testing is part of the solution, and I think you're onto something here. Whenever I have this conversation with people, they go, oh yes, but you know, to set up a system of means testing will cost so much money. But ultimately, I think that is the fairest way of doing it. We shouldn't be giving money to people who, to be blunt, don't need it. I mean, I don't think that's particularly harsh or radical, and particularly, you know, if it's people like you and I who get out of bed in the morning and go and work, I'd have no problem with my taxpayers' money being spent to help people who genuinely need it. I have a massive bloody issue if it's wasted and going to people who don't deserve it.
Yeah. I mean, means testing, it is possible. Universal credit is already means tested. That's how it operates. Other benefits are means tested. Child benefit, that's means tested. You have all of these systems that are already means tested. It wouldn't be that difficult to means test disability benefits in the same system. But yeah, absolutely. The whole point of this discussion is that ultimately taxpayers are the ones paying for it. Taxpayers are the people getting out of bed in the morning, working hard, paying incredibly high taxes. all to pay for people that aren't in the same boat as them.
OK, final question. Do you think new Prime Minister Andy Burnham, 4 weeks into the job, still unproven and untested, do you think he's got the backbone and the political will to address this spiralling spending? Or will you and I be having this conversation in 18 months' time yet again?
Well, I think more than likely we probably will. But Andy Burnham is a very effective political player. We've clearly seen that. Obviously, he walked straight into number 10. Yeah. He seems to have quite a lot of control over his party, and so far, he's saying things that people sort of perk their ears up and go, oh, we like that. When it becomes budget season and he starts realising, actually, we're going to have to put up taxes even higher, actually, to appease the voters who, keep in mind, have not voted him in.
Yes.
Most of the country hasn't voted for him.
He's got no mandate.
He has to appeal to people somehow. And quite frankly, politically, the way to appeal to people in this country is by just saying, we're going to spend more.
Yeah, give them stuff.
Yeah.
Anne Strickland from the Taxpayers Alliance, thank you. Pleasure to have you in the Talk studio. If you want to pick up on anything you've just heard, do give us a call tonight, 0344 499 1000. I suppose chiefly the question is, when we talk about the benefits system in Britain, how do we make it better for the future? And what I mean by that is benefit for the taxpayer, not those who are getting something for nothing. This is Talk.
Go to Calais train station?
Yes, train station.
Okay. I was gripping. It was brutal.
Come on, guys!
Ready, full touch, go on! And we're on the way over to UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thursday evening, this is Talk. It's the home of common sense. I'm Duncan Barkes. It's the evening exchange through until 10 o'clock tonight. Guess who's on at 10? Phil Dave is here. from 10 o'clock tonight. I love Phil. I've known Phil for many, many years. And there's a great thing that we do here at Talk called, it's on YouTube, it's called Down Your Local, Down the Local, where we go to a pub somewhere and we have some beer, we put the world to rights. It's having a little bit of a summer break at the moment, but do go to our YouTube channel and search for Phil Dave and Down the Local, because there's some great stuff on there. Away from YouTube, here's On the Air tonight from 10, here at Talk, the home of common sense. We're chewing over a couple of things between now and 10 p.m. Who should pay for Harry and Meghan's security? That's one of the issues. Back in Blighty, they flew in yesterday, Birmingham Airport, on a private jet that cost £90,000. Apparently they've got no money. I think it's quite clear that they have got some dosh knocking around, which maybe is the argument to say, well, the taxpayer definitely should not be paying for their security. I do find myself wrestling, though, with this idea that because Harry is a target, because he served in Afghanistan and admitted in his book, Spare, that he took out 20 to 25 Taliban, that he will be a target for some nut jobs in this country who have some weird political and religious ideologies. So with that in mind, should we not fork out a bit of cash to help with the security? 0344 499 1000 for your thoughts on that. Let's take some voice notes on this. This is Hayley.
Hi Duncan, Hayley from Surrey here.
Hello.
This business regarding Harry and Meghan, honestly, she obviously wears the trousers, and I do feel sorry for Harry. I think he feels bad that he's lost his family, but I think she was pulling the strings the whole time. She just wanted to marry someone who'd make her even more famous. And the thing is, she's not liked. I didn't like her from the beginning, and it was just a whole big mistake. And now Harry's lumbered because she's obviously had his children. Yeah, that's how I feel about Harry, and also how I feel about her. Not a lot. Okay, bye.
All right, Hayley, thank you for that. It is interesting, isn't it, what Hayley said, this idea that, you know, from the outset that people in this country never really liked Meghan. And I wonder what the catalyst for that was. I'd welcome a further set of thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. Also talking about Harry and Meg, this is Tristan.
Duncan, I can't believe we're talking about Meghan and bloody Harry.
Why not?
God. Yes, he is a part of the royal family. Okay, that's a given. But yes. he acts so entitled. We know that people shouldn't take pictures of the children. We know that people shouldn't know the location of your home. You shouldn't need to say and order this to happen. Oh, and the idea with the net zero stuff, oh God, that is insufferable. And then he comes on a private jet, for the love of God. I mean, seriously, he is the epitome of hypocrisy. I am sick of him, to be honest with you, but he's here now.
All right, Tristan, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but let's be brutal and blunt about this. You know, hypocrisy when it comes to net zero is not just in the domain of Harry and Meghan flying in on a private jet that cost 90 grand. You know, we've got Ed Miliband, who used to be the Energy Secretary. Now he's the Foreign Secretary in a different job, not remotely practicing what he preached when he was Energy Secretary, banging on about net zero. I mean, the hypocrisy around net zero in all forms from all of these campaigners and preachers who tell us how to live our lives really is off the scale. Listen, keep your voice notes coming in. 0344 499 1000. We're also discussing this evening about the benefit system in Britain and how do we make it better. Let's take a call on this. It's Mark in Lincolnshire. Hello, Mark. Welcome.
Hi there, Duncan.
What would you like to say, sir?
Yeah, just regarding the benefits thing. In particular with reforms policy that they brought out, these look like classic sweeping changes to the system, which basically means people like myself with health problems will have their benefits stopped and you have to reapply and go through another year of hell trying to get it again.
This is the Reform UK policy.
Yes, that's correct. So it's kind of a warning to them and Restore, really, that they need more nuance in these things, because otherwise they're going to lose a lot of voters. That's the reality.
Now, it's interesting. So I don't want to delve too deeply, but you said that you've got health conditions. So your concern or your observation would be with the reform policy that people have to be, what, reassessed on a regular basis. You believe that would be unfair?
Yes, I do.
Tell me why.
Well, for example, like I said, it took me a year to get the benefits that I'm on now. which is actually only the full health element of universal credit, actually.
Yeah.
But my situation, for example, has deteriorated over the time anyway.
Yeah.
I literally had my GP here yesterday wanting to talk to me about Parkinson's.
Right.
So, do you know what I mean? You can see my point.
No, I see the point. I mean, I'm wondering, and you're right, nuance is needed in this conversation, and sadly, political parties across the board can't do nuance because they need policies that can be understood by 8-year-olds. I don't mean that to be overtly patronising, but, you know, I've worked in policy creation and that is the case. What would you say to people? I'll ask a different question. How do we set it up in such a way, Mark, which means people like yourself don't have to go through the process of being reassessed all of the time, yet we still reassess people who maybe should not be receiving those benefits in the first place so we can catch them out? How do we do it?
You do it through the DWP, really, because they have a list of who's getting what for what reason.
Yeah.
You know, so you just create that list, and you just investigate the ones that you need to.
You investigate them, so what, you spy on them to see if they're genuine about saying they have a disability or something?
No, it would come down to what health condition they're claiming it for.
Yeah.
Really. So if it's anxiety or something, then you can investigate that further, can't you?
Understood. Yeah. OK. And your concern is, just a final question, so Reform UK have outlined their policy regarding this. You mentioned Restore Britain. You think they might turn off certain voters if they go in too hard on this?
Yeah, they will. Even ones that work in the red wall. They will also see this as unfair. A lot of them will. Not all of them, but a lot of them will. I know that from first hand because I've already had people say it to me.
So they would say, so people, how far would they go with this, Mark? Would they decide not to vote for a political party purely on its policy of tackling welfare spending?
Quite possibly, yes.
Really interesting call. Thank you for it. I'm going to squeeze in another one, if that's OK. This is Leonie in Croydon. Hello.
Hello, Duncan. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. What would you like to say this evening?
Duncan, I'm a bit frustrated. Not for the first time when I've called. I love you guys. Honestly, talk is my opportunity to kind of rant.
It's cathartic, isn't it, this channel? It's cathartic, yeah.
It is cathartic, but this whole area has really, really sparked something in me. So,
go on.
Just give you a little bit of background. So, I'm a psychiatric nurse by background.
Yep.
And having left the nursing field, I was diagnosed myself with a serious mental health condition.
Okay.
That is very challenging to manage, but I have worked every single day of my life ever since, and in a very difficult area.
Yep.
But I'm not saying it's easy, it's difficult. I have 2 children. My youngest has got profound autism. She is non-verbal and is in a specialist school. And the thing that really sticks with me is every time the school demands that I go racing in for one thing or another, oh, we forget, I'm so sorry, Leonie, you are literally the only parent we have that works.
Right, OK.
And for me, that doesn't make sense, because she goes off it's very stressful, but she goes in her car in the morning, I send her off, I then have 6 hours, it's a short day that they have in a special school, but I have 6 hours. My husband now works nights early. He got up at 3 o'clock this morning. He's working again tonight to try and make sure that we can provide for our family while I work. So he is doing this around. We do everything we can to support our children, but there is no need for us, either of us or both of us, to sit on benefits. We can work. We can make sure that both of our children know that this is important. You have to provide. If you're going to have children, you have to provide.
Right, so you're working during the day. Your husband's doing, what, a night shift? Did he work late hours?
He works for Uber because it allows him to work around the flexibility.
Yeah.
He gets up at 3 o'clock every single morning. He goes to work. He comes home.
Right.
I go out to work. He then goes out again in the evening. This is not conducive to a family life.
No, but you're doing what I would consider, and I think a lot of our listeners and viewers would consider to be the right thing, because if I've understood you correctly, it would be perhaps easier for you to say, well, we can't do this, and my husband can't work for all of these kind of reasons, and given the commitment and the support we need to provide to other members of our family. So let me tell you then, let me ask you this, where do you think the attitude has come from? I mean, you said a few moments ago, which is quite startling, that, you know, you turn up at your kid's school and it turns out that you are the only parent who seems to work, right? What makes you different from other people? Why are other people just going, well, I don't have to do it, so I won't?
I think, to be honest, it was the way I was brought up and my husband was brought up, and that is that you just get up and you keep going. I'm going to be honest with you, Duncan, I've got bipolar disorder, so this is quite challenging in itself, and at the moment it's particularly challenging. But my only option is to just get up and be there and just keep going for my kids. I've got a 14-year-old boy, he's about to start his GCSEs, and I've got my Lily, who is just so, I mean, God love her, but she is non-verbal, and her ability to understand how normal life works is it's not there yet. I pray to God it will be. But for them, and the way my parents brought me up and the way my husband's parents brought, if you have kids, you just keep turning up for them. You don't let them down. You just toil. I have had to take the odd few days off from work when I have been in a really bad place. I'm not suggesting it's easy. It is absolute. This morning, I was awake all last night crying my eyes out, and the anxiety about trying to work today was so awful. But I know my kids depend on me, because no one's going to pay for them to eat or keep a roof over their head if I don't. No. And I'm not saying, I'm not minimalising what people are going through, but it's too easy for people to just go, oh, I'm a bit anxious, I don't want to go out today.
Well, this is what I'm going to ask you, and before I ask you the question, I just want to say thank you for calling up, because, you know, calls like yours are worth their weight in gold. But let me just ask you this final question: how do we fix the benefit system? Because the spending is spiralling out of control. It is clear that you know people, from what you said, who aren't working because it's an easier option. How do we fix it?
This is going to sound really, really harsh, but the only way is to stop the benefits, bring everybody in for face-to-face. This has got to stop where people are being filling in a form, and they can tick the boxes. There is so much. I've got it all on Instagram. There is so much where people are told, say this, say that, and this will get you a free pass. If you've got a child that's got ADHD, well, my child has got ADHD plus numerous other things, but it doesn't mean I can't work. But we have to stop that. People have to be brought in for face-to-face interviews.
It's a return to the face-to-face assessments, isn't it? And maybe with some means testing rolled into that. Listen, Leonie in Croydon, your call was worth its weight in gold, and thank you for making it. More calls to come, 0344 499 1000. If you joined us halfway through that, one of the things we're asking this evening here at Talk is, how do we make Britain's benefit system better? And also just a little bit of chat going on about Harry and Meghan back on these shores, and who should pay for their security. 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your WhatsApp messages and your voice notes. But up next, we look at some of the political stories of the night with Kevin Schofield, the political editor of HuffPost UK.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Duncan Barkes. It's the evening exchange here at Talk. I'm here through until 10 o'clock tonight. Phil Dave here from 10. Let's look at some of the political stories of the last few hours here on Talk with political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. Evening, Kev.
Hi, Duncan. How are you?
Very well indeed. Good to see you as always. Let's just chew over the comments made by the Work and Pension Secretary, Pat McFadden, earlier today. He was at the headquarters of Boots in Nottingham as the first wave of young people to qualify for the government's Jobs Guarantee programme, which encourages employers to hire youth workers started in their new positions. He made some interesting remarks, including saying that he believes Britain's benefit system is flawed and leaves people written off from work. Now, you know, we've had various work and pension secretaries over the years. They make noises about perhaps trying to reform the benefit system. We have seen recently, or we saw inside the last couple of years, Keir Starmer running into a bit of bother with some Labour backbenchers, trying to shave off, I think it was about £5 billion from the welfare bill. Do you think Pat McFadden's got the will here to try and change things?
I do think Pat McFadden gets it. I mean, he's certainly on the right of the Labour Party. He's not a sort of hand-wringing liberal. He actually wrote for HuffPost today as well, actually talking about this, and what I thought what he had to say was quite interesting about the purpose of the welfare state. He said it shouldn't just be about guaranteeing a minimum income, it should be offering people a future too. So it's sort of, he doesn't believe, and actually, if you remember, Duncan, as well, those private messages between him and Peter Mandelson a few months ago, when he talked about, he was bemoaning the fact that Labour MPs that come to him, all they want to talk about is putting up taxes to spend on benefits, and he does not agree with that one little bit. And I think it was interesting that he was one of the few cabinet members who actually kept their job when Andy Burnham became Prime Minister. I think he could appreciate that Pat McFadden, I think, is the right man in the right job right now. So I think he's certainly talking the talk, and I think he does mean what he says, but like all ministers and all politicians, he will be judged on results. NEETs, the not in employment, education, or training young people, came down a little bit in the last 3 months, but he acknowledges there's still an awful long way to go. And this is just one way of trying to encourage young people back into work and try to get them a future.
Do we think that Pat McFadden, and you mentioned rightly that he is on the right, if you like, of the Labour Party, so he gets it. Do we think he's up for a scrap alongside Andy Burnham with maybe the Labour backbenchers whose immediate knee-jerk reaction would be to balk at any idea of changing or reforming the benefit system?
I think Pat McFadden himself would be up for it. Whether Andy Burnham is up for it is another question entirely. We know that Andy Burnham is a bit of a people pleaser. He's talked about, you know, bringing the Labour family together. Well, it's such a broad church, you know, you can't basically, I think, encourage someone like John McDonnell to see eye to eye someone on the right of the party when it comes to welfare. So I think that is when it's going to be difficult for him. You mentioned as well, rightly, you know, Keir Starmer, his authority was shot to bits when he tried to cut £5 billion from the welfare bill, which in relative terms is a tiny amount, really. And there's a huge backbench rebellion, and his authority was gone, I think, from that moment onwards. Pat McFadden hasn't talked about trying to take money out of the welfare bill because I think he knows that just goes down really badly with Labour backbenchers. I think he's trying to do it in a more subtle way, trying to bring down the bill by getting more people back into work. But, you know, successive governments, successive work and pension secretaries have tried that, have talked about it, and have failed to do so. And as I said earlier, he'll be judged by whether or not he's successful or not. It looks like he's made a reasonable start, but you know, there's still an awful long way to go.
Labour's early release scheme, the early release of prisoners across the country, which was set to happen, I think, in September, it now looks like it's happening at the beginning of October, remains a headache, doesn't it, for Andy Burnham? Because we remember the images that we saw last year of people getting released out of prison earlier on the TV, in the newspapers, and I think most law-abiding people just thought this is utterly disgusting. We're going to see these pictures again. It continues to be a headache for Andy Burnham, particularly when we learn of a letter signed by more than 100 organisations sent to the Prime Minister saying that Labour's early release scheme directly contradicts the party's pledge to halve violence against women and girls. How much of a problem is this for the Prime Minister, Kevin?
I think it's a really big problem. I mean, the focus on this story more recently has been about, obviously, the potential early release of the killers, or two of the killers of PC Andrew Harper. Now, there's pressure on Alex Norris, obviously the Justice Secretary. He's come to the Commons next week when MPs are back to set out exactly how he's going to stop that from happening. But here, as you say, in the Times tonight, they're talking about organisations who are saying, well, hang on a minute, there's other prisoners who will be released early as a part of this scheme, and they are beyond the pale as well, no perpetrators of violence against women. Now, that is something that Labour in opposition and in their election manifesto promised to crack down on, violence against women and girls, and, you know, letting out perpetrators of those heinous crimes early clearly cuts across that commitment. So it's unsurprising, I think, that other pressure groups and other organisations are saying, well, hang on a minute, if you're going to try and change the rules to keep those guys inside, well, why shouldn't you be doing it to keep this lot inside as well? And it's almost impossible, I think, for Andy Burnham to keep everyone happy on this, because we know that the prisons are bursting at the seams. But politically, it's absolutely toxic. You're right, it's a terrible look for any government to be releasing prisoners early. And, you know, those images will be on the front page of every newspaper. They'll be at the top of every news bulletin across the country when that happens, and that will be a really bad look indeed.
A curious news story of the last 24 hours, which is that Berlin could bolster Britain's nuclear programme under plans to end Europe's reliance on America for defence. Just walk us through this, Kevin, if you'd be kind enough.
Yeah, so this is a really good scoop from the Telegraph, where they say that Germany is in talks right now to invest in Britain's nuclear deterrent. They're considering offering financial support for Trident. Now, given, I think, the fact that we know that money is incredibly tight at the Ministry of Defence and that the government is already trying to plug a £5 billion black hole in the defence investment plan, I think any support perhaps that Germany is willing to provide may well be looked on pretty favourably, certainly by the Treasury. But it would be a pretty unusual arrangement, I think, for another country, albeit an ally, a NATO ally like Germany, looking to invest in our own nuclear deterrent. Now, we know historically there are reasons why Germany has never itself sought to build a bomb, you know, a nuclear bomb, given, you know, its own military history and the legacy of World War II, etc. So I think this is an inventive way of trying to bolster Europe's defences, because we know it's been repeated multiple times by Donald Trump and J.D. Vance that they're not going to help us out anymore. We need to protect ourselves. And if Germany are willing to help Britain, then, as I say, I think that will be looked upon pretty favourably by the Labour government.
A final nugget I want to chuck in your direction. I find this genuinely fascinating. It really is, I think, a case of who's telling the truth here. And the background is regarding the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, who met Kemi Badenoch, leader of the Conservative Party. They met on Monday. And we were told that Meloni said to Kemi that she should be your own woman and stand your ground against those on the right calling for a coalition with Nigel Farage. Then it turns out, according to sources close to the Italian Premier, that she never said such a thing. What do you make of this?
I mean, as a traditional, kind of good old-fashioned political Horlicks, I think. I mean, I think this is... Now, I have no inside information on this, but, you know, reading the story initially, I thought, great scoop. I think what's happened here is the Tories have decided to brief a private conversation to the Times. This is what Giorgia Meloni said to Kemi Badenoch. As you say, Duncan, as soon as the story hit the press, Italy, the Italian government went bananas and said, no, she did not say this. And the Times had to roll back on the story. It's very embarrassing, not just for the Times, but mainly for Kemi Badenoch. I mean, it looks as though there's been a real spin operation here, and it's got completely out of control, and it's damaged relations between Kemi Badenoch and the Italian Prime Minister. And I think it'll be a long time before she's invited for a quiet coffee like she was earlier this week, because it looks as though it's completely blown up in her face.
What are we going to put this down to? Is this conspiracy, you know, is a press officer at the Conservative Party gone a bit rogue, or is it cock-up?
I think it's a combination of both. I think certainly they've definitely overspun it. I think they've thought, oh, we can maybe interpret what George Maloney said. When you look at the actual quote about her being her own woman, there was no actual direct quotes there about don't do a deal with reform. I think that was a bit of overinterpretation maybe by the Conservative Party. They've then lost the run of themselves a little bit. They've briefed it to the Times, and as I say, they've had to embarrassingly climb down. And it's all a bit of a humiliation, really.
Bit of a Horlicks. I'm going to nick that. Kevin, thank you. Kevin Schofield, political editor of HuffPost UK. Kevin's part of a great podcast called Commons People, which, if you love your politics, you certainly need to take a listen to. It's almost 10 to 9. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Duncan Barkes. Up next, we talk to broadcaster and meteorologist Joe Wheeler off the back of the appalling scenes we've been seeing in Nepal over the last 24 hours. We'll get to that next here at Talk.
Go to Calais train station?
Yes, train station.
Okay. I was gaping. It was brutal. Come on, guys! Ready, full touch, go on! And they're on the way over to UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
10 minutes to 9. Thursday evening, I'm Duncan Barkes. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm here through until 10 o'clock tonight. Phil Dave here from 10. And we'll catch up with him in the next hour, find out what he's doing as we round off Thursday together here at Talk. In the meantime, you will have seen the pictures, maybe online, on your TV screens, even in the newspapers, about the flash flooding in Nepal, which has killed over 350 people, and there are warnings of fresh dangers from rising lake water. To give us some background to this story and to tell us what we need to know is Joe Wheeler, broadcaster and meteorologist. Good evening, Joe.
Good evening. I'm not entirely sure that everybody knows all the details and the whys and wherefores yet. Initially, this incredible tragedy was put down to potentially an earthquake, because a magnitude 4.4 was measured on the Richter scale, but it turned out, in fact, that it was more likely to be a glacial avalanche. Yeah. So unaccustomed as we are to using such words, which basically released this huge swathe of rock and ice and mud and water down into a river tributary, which then dammed and then burst, and that released this tsunami of water, which rushed at, it's been estimated, 50 meters per second. Well, there's no way you can outrun that. Right. It's annihilated villages. It's annihilated around 25 miles worth of roads. communications are down, and because of the terrain around there, these very deep Himalayan valleys, it's very difficult to try and get any rescues out there, difficult for the helicopters to fly in, even if they could, even if you could send a fleet of helicopters into there, simply they don't have the capacity to remove the number of people who are injured and need help.
Let's talk about the avalanche a little bit, and forgive my ignorance here, which is why we've got you on to fill in the gaps. I'll be perfectly honest with you. This kind of avalanche, are they particularly common?
No, I don't think they are. You know, I'm not going to say it's a one-off. We've possibly seen similar things before, but certainly not on this scale. And of course, there are questions to be answered. Is a warming climate causing the glaciers to melt in the high Himalayas? Has that caused this? You know, could it be something more to do with infrastructure? Because certainly, you know, whatever infrastructure there was has been pretty much wiped out and will have to be started again. So all sorts of questions will have to be asked. And obviously, the potential for this kind of tragedy to happen again. Hopefully not. I mean, this was in an area where there are a lot of tourists and trekkers and pilgrims. And that's why we're seeing so many foreign nationals amongst the missing. And the injured and sadly the dead as well. It's going to be very hard to actually establish how many people were there, what safety precautions, if any, were in place. But, you know, whilst this has been a terrible tragedy, it's not over yet. They've seen from satellite pictures that the lakes around the flood site are rising, and there's every potential that those could break their banks again and cause further problems.
I mean, is there anything the authorities can do to try and temper the situation? I mean, looking at the pictures that we're showing at the moment here on YouTube and indeed elsewhere, and the pictures that other people can take a look at their leisure, I mean, this is literally out of control, isn't it? I mean, it sounds brutal, but is it just a case of letting nature take its course?
Unfortunately, I think it is at this stage. As I say, you know, many of the villages have been wiped out, the roads, the infrastructure. You know, it's a bad enough situation if many of those things were still in place, still in situ, but they're not. And so, as I say, starting with communications, people just can't speak to each other. Their help can't be called for. And even if it could be called for, how do you deal with those situations that could potentially get worse before they get better? I think for the time being, it's going to be a situation of trying to work your way through it, trying to help those that can be helped, trying to evacuate those who can be evacuated, and, you know, later to consider exactly what happened here, why it was so bad, and how it can be prevented in the future.
Joe, pleasure to have you on the air. Thank you, as always, for your knowledge and expertise. That's broadcaster and meteorologist Joe Wheeler talking about, well, again, if you've been watching on YouTube, you will have seen the images. You will have seen the pictures as well in the newspapers and elsewhere on the TV about the flash flood in Nepal that at the moment looks like has killed over 350 people. There are literally countless people still missing, a number of children still missing as well, and this new threat of fresh danger from rising lake water. 5 minutes to 9 is the time. It's Talk. It's the home of common sense. Let me just do some of your messages coming in. We've been talking about getting people into work off the back of the rising benefits bill. This is a really good message. Thank you, MJ, for getting involved. 0344 499 1000. MJ says, I would just like to know, please, Duncan, if your callers who are talking about their work have ever been in the position of, 1, having to upload a CV and completed a job application online, 2, being told brusquely after making inquiries in person about available work to go online for jobs, 3, being told to pay £50 for an enhanced DBS check. This is what job seekers are having to do now, even for charity shop voluntary work. When people talk on your shows about what they did and how they have worked for years, etc., please could you remind those people that those days have long gone, and then there are even more barriers for job seekers today. A smart person who has caught 2 buses to visit a new potential workplace and make inquiries is given no more credit than a scruff who does not bother and just sits at a computer screen to apply online for work. Thank you for reading this. MJ, thank you for sending it. I think that's really interesting. And maybe I'm guilty of this a little bit because, you know, when I was young, and I was young once, you know, and I was a teenager and in my early 20s, if you wanted a job, I mean, this is what you did. So we're talking here, all right, bear with me, the late 1980s, early 1990s. If you wanted a job, you would go to a shop and you might ask if they had any work available, or if you were clever, you might take your CV in and have a little note attached to it, like a letter saying, hello, to whom it may concern, da 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 da. And there is a very good chance that you might get a call from the manager or a supervisor, you might get a trial shift, and if you were capable of doing the job, you would get the gig that you wanted. And of course, that doesn't happen now. You are absolutely fair to make the point, MJ, that there are more barriers in place to someone finding work than there ever have been before. And can I just tell you the one thing that really does my nut? And, you know, I'm not going to mention people without their permission on this show, but there are young people in my life, right, who've applied for jobs in the past. The thing that I think is most unforgivable, if not disheartening, and frankly, bloody rude, is when you apply for a job online and you never get a reply. You might get someone just going, we've received your application, but you never get told if you've been successful or not. And what I mean by that is there's no response just going, thank you, on this occasion you've been unsuccessful, right? Which is basic courtesy. It doesn't happen anymore. It used to happen, but it doesn't happen. And I can only imagine, because I've never had to experience it, thankfully, that you could sit at your laptop all day, your computer, applying for jobs online, uploading your CVs and stuff, thinking, well, look, my CV matches the job description here and the requirements, and you never hear anything back. And to experience that time and time and time and time again must be massively disheartening. 0344 499 1000. You want to pick up on that? Because I think MJ's message is really, really interesting regarding how hard it is to find work. Because it's very easy for my guest to sit here in the studio and indeed myself to go, well, go and find some work. And, you know, famously it was Norman Tebbit, do you remember? When he was a Conservative Party chairman, I think it was, saying, you know, when my dad was out of work, he got on his bike and he looked for work, and people used to mock him for saying that. And there was a time when you could do that. And I think MJ's message makes it very clear that it's not as simple as it used to be. Maybe it should be. Listen, I'm Duncan Barkes. This is Talk on a Thursday evening. I'm here through until 10 o'clock. After 9, we talk to Kevin Foster, former Immigration Minister and former Conservative MP for Tor Bay. We'll be talking about the number of foreign criminals on Britain's streets who should be deported as it reaches record levels as the amount of migrants applying to settle in the UK hits a 16-year high. More on that after 9 tonight.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Duncan Barkes. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm here through until 10 o'clock tonight. It is the evening exchange, and I'm taking care of business for Peter Cardwell. I'm back here tomorrow afternoon between 1 and 4 as well. You see, what happens at places like Talk in August, people go off at different times. So people like me come off the subs bench and fill in the gaps. So it's really good to have your company tonight, and do hang around and tune in tomorrow afternoon from 1. In this hour, we're going to pick over a couple of stories that I think are set to get the blood pressure racing, one of which is something we mentioned earlier. The number of foreign criminals on Britain's streets who are subject to deportation has increased by more than 2,000 in a year. This is in the wake of Labour's soft justice measures. These are Home Office figures, and they show that 21,294 foreign national offenders were living free in the community in the year up to June 2026. So those are the latest figures. It's up from 18,993 a year earlier. Now, this increase is blamed on the impact of Labour's Sentencing Act, which, as you all know, has seen thousands of criminals released early under a bid to combat prison overcrowding. The number of foreign criminals awaiting deportation stood at 17,677 at the time of the general election. Today's figures, I don't know why I'm laughing, it's just out of despair. Today's figures revealed the number of asylum seekers living outside hotels has exceeded 73,000. Home Office confirming that 73,068 asylum seekers were living in non-hotel accommodation, such as shared homes, flats or military bases in the year to June 2026. That's up 3% on the year earlier. And as you all know, because they keep telling us it's happening, Labour ministers are continuing to move migrants out of hotels, with the number housed in them falling by 50% to 16,000, the lowest figure since 2022. The total has previously reached 56,000 at the end of September 2023. Let's get a view on this. Kevin Foster is a former immigration minister and the former Conservative MP for Torbay. He joins us this evening. Hello, Kevin.
Hi, Duncan. Hi.
Thanks for your time on this Thursday night. What's your initial reaction to these figures?
Well, whilst there's some positives that come out of today's figures, such as the number of small boats are down on last year, but that's because they went up last year quite a bit. You know, it does tell its own tale that for example, the government's made a lot about the asylum backlog being down to 40,000 for initial decision, yet then doesn't point out the fact that a lot of those have moved into the appeals backlog. There's still like 93,000 people in supported asylum accommodation. And when you look at that figure of 73,000, it really shows that a lot of people, when they heard that, you know, asylum hotels are going to be closed. Now, none of us would argue that that's not a good aspiration to have. A lot of people listening to that would think, oh, good, they're going to be removed from the country. No, they're not. They're actually going to be housed in HIMO, a sort of housing shared occupation in communities, in one of communities across the country. And given the nature of our housing market, those are more likely to be in some of our bigger cities, towns and places that have struggled with a number of other issues, potentially more deprived areas, than they are like to be in quite wealthy rural ones. So these figures, you know, there is some encouragement for the government there, but it also lays bare some of the challenges, and particularly the foreign national offenders one. You know, these aren't people who've nicked a push bike. These are people who are due to be deported, having been convicted of a serious crime. And that actually, for some of them, there isn't actually a route to get them out the country, either due to our human rights laws when they come up to be deported, the courts frustrate that, or because we don't return at the moment to countries like Afghanistan, even though countries like Germany do.
Yeah, let's talk about the lack of a deterrent here, because we know, and we talk about it often here on Talk, that the Conservative government had in place the Rwanda scheme. One of the first things that Keir Starmer did when he became Prime Minister was scrap the scheme. There is no deterrent to stop people coming here. There are a great number of pull factors. Anyone with a brain can see that Britain is a very attractive place to come to if you're seeking asylum, as many claim they are, or as I take the view, they're simply migrants who want to come to another country for all kinds of reasons. Why do you think this government cannot see that an effective deterrent would stop people coming here?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Duncan. And when you've got figures like, what, about 4% of small boat arrivals have been removed, and I suspect a lot of them would have been displaced to Albania, which actually was a country that 3 years ago signed a deal on the return of people. It's always actually as embarrassing that its citizens were coming here in a small boat and to claim asylum. A lot of it, though, is when you start looking at the Labour Party itself. Now, I suspect if you had Siobhan Mahmood and talked to her privately, she'd say that, look, we need to deal with this issue. And you've already heard them start to float the idea that not a Rwanda plan, that was the silly Tories' idea, but a third country option where people could be sent. The fact that that might be in the Central Africa area is just a magic coincidence. But, you know, we're already starting to see some of that narrative change. The issue they've got is a lot of their backbenchers. And my own view is there's almost certainly a majority for a Rwanda-style plan in Parliament. Most MPs can see that there needs to be done, something needs to be done about this. The problem for the Prime Minister is that that's probably a majority with the Labour front bench plus Reform and Conservative MPs voting with them, whilst a lot of Labour backbenchers vote against.
Yeah, and I think there's a mindset. I think there's something in the Labour Party DNA that doesn't question the people who come to this country illegally, you know, break into this country, as many Talk listeners describe it as, and Talk viewers, by crossing the channel on small boats. And the Labour position is, well, all of these people must be genuine asylum seekers, so we must do everything possible to help them. They can't even consider the possibility that a chunk of these people, if not the majority of them, that's certainly my view, are not genuinely seeking asylum, because if you're scared of your life or saving your life, you'd stop in the first safe country, right? You wouldn't take a boat crossing across the channel where you might actually lose your life. They are coming here because there are a lot of pull factors and a lot of reasons to come here, and yet the DNA of the Labour Party, I believe, is, no, well, we don't believe in any of that. These people are genuine asylum seekers. Do you think they will ever wake up and smell the coffee?
I think some are. And I think there's some who looked at the election results back in May, particularly in places like Barnsley, Sunderland, Gateshead, South Tyneside, you know, places that had been solidly Labour my entire life. You know, literally the council formed in 1974 and it was Labour controlled until May. And in those instances, with Reform gaining, well, it's quite clear even the most out of touch Labour MP would have to conclude that people didn't vote the way they did in those constituencies and those council elections because they wanted to have a more pro-migrant stance and rejoin the European Union. You know, that's clearly not what they were voting for. So I think some of it is starting to break through, particularly to ministers having to deal with this. And we are seeing, for example, they are taking forward some reforms of the immigration tribunal system, you know, the ones that produce ludicrous stuff like chicken nuggets. Yeah. But there's still a core of many of their MPs who, as you say, Duncan, you know, genuinely think that everyone coming from France, you know, France, say democratic France, is fleeing some terrible persecution that they must have been experiencing in the EU, which they also, by the way, want to rejoin, many of them. You know, that's just doesn't seem to get through, except for the fact that I think many are realising that, you know, if they want to actually do well at the next general election, it cannot be an election defined by arguing about the small boat crisis and immigration. And that means they've actually got to solve the problem, not just come up with a new slogan.
Well, you'd hope so. And I mean, what's interesting about all of this, whilst the government and the Home Office get quite excited and saying, oh, well, you know, we're reducing the number of asylum seekers or migrants staying in hotels, they are going elsewhere. They're going to military bases, they're going to homes, shared flats, etc., and along the way, what happens? It's always the British taxpayer who's picking up the tab. And I think the majority of people are just fed up of it.
Yeah, I think you look at most polling, people want to see a solution. It's been quite interesting, actually, over the last year, as, you know, the old rhetoric of smash the gangs, you know, a slogan, not a strategy, got ditched, that actually we have seen some, you know, what you call grandees on the Labour side start to challenge the type of the Lord Hermer style view, you know, the former Attorney General, thank goodness now, he's been moved on, but about actually why are we so wedded to defending the rights of people to game treaties that were written in the 1950s to protect against what the Nazis did, not to be gained in the 21st century about people having a particular type of chicken nugget they like. You know, that wasn't what this framework of law was set up for. And you've started to see people like David Blunkett over the last year come out, and Jack Straw, big names from the Labour past, start to say, well, actually, why are we so wedded to this stuff, particularly given, actually, the communities it most impacts are traditionally Labour voting communities. A lot of these 73,000 are not housed in Belgravia. No. You know, they're housed in places like Bolsover, like Barnsley. They're housed in places like Stoke-on-Trent with accommodation that, Home Office contractors can pick up more cheaply. It's traditional Labour voters feeling the hit of this and are not happy about it. And if Andy Burnham really wants to win them back, then you're absolutely right. He's going to have to find a solution for this problem, deal with the boats, end the problems coming over the channel, and then the idea that we're a soft touch and that taxpayers are going to carry on paying, particularly if he wants to do other things around the public finances. The only way to get public consent for that is to sort out the issues of illegal migration.
Well, yeah, and I mean, these Labour grandees, people like Lord Blunkett and others, they've got wisdom, they've got knowledge, they've got experience. They can see how this is damaging the traditional old-school Labour vote. Someone who got into the Labour Party as an MP a couple of years ago in 2024 simply doesn't have that grasp of real life.
There's an element of that. It's quite interesting when you look at some of the backgrounds of those who got elected in Labour. Because, of course, some of them weren't expected even by the Labour Party to get elected. But, with what happened during that election campaign, they did. And, the Conservative Party has to take it on the chin about the fact that we should have gone further and done more on this. No two ways about that. But, yeah, there is this, I think the realisation's coming for many because, the reality is if you want to get re-elected, you need to get back a lot of those traditional Labour voters who are unhappy about this and show them that you can solve this problem. There's models out there. They can look at Australia, they can look at Greece, they can look at the United States of America as to how you tackle this type of problem. But there isn't an easy solution. There's nothing that will please everyone. No. But if you don't deal with this, then, you're going to really struggle to convince people that you've got a grip on their safety and putting their interests first. And you find it very difficult for John Healey to deliver a budget that reformed things like welfare and other areas of public spending, which do need to be done, whilst people can still turn around and say, but hang on, John, you're asking me and my family to make these sacrifices, yet look what's happening every morning in Dover and how much money you're spending on people breaking into our country. That's something that they've got to do it before they could move on to any of those issues.
And Kevin, just before you think it can't get any worse, we discover from the Daily Telegraph that asylum seekers are being prioritised for council housing by a Labour-run council. This is in Edinburgh, where homeless people who have effectively had their asylum claims approved have been moved to the top of the waiting list for social housing under a policy instituted in April 2025. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up.
No, you couldn't, and it probably explains some of the rather dire position Scottish Labour was in back in the May elections. Let's remind, I can remember, Scotland being like Labour's fiefdom, 50-odd Labour seats, guaranteed pretty much at every general election, not anymore. So you just look at it and think that isn't going to solve any issue. It's not going to deter anyone. And what's the worst bit about all this, Duncan, is the sort of person who took that decision, that this is a great thing to do, let's virtue signal whatever, is the sort of person who then goes home to their nice house or their nice part of town. They're not the person, they're not the family that's waiting on the list, desperately trying to get somewhere to house. The person in temporary accommodation or not in accommodation that's okay, but it's not really meeting their needs. That's where, a lot of those who like to have a warm, fuzzy glow on this issue aren't the ones who face the cold, sharp reality of it.
Yeah, and one of the symptoms of this is all it does is create further division, right? If you wanted to bring the great British public on side and have them maybe in a position where, some might say, a little bit more understanding regarding people who come to this country for whatever reason they claim, if you wanted to bring them on side, you wouldn't initiate a policy here, which I think a lot of Talk viewers and listeners simply think is, hang on a second, you effectively break into this country illegally, you haven't gone through the proper channels, and if you rock up in Edinburgh, you're going to go to the top of the list for social housing and be rewarded for what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. You've just hit the nail on the head. People are angry at the idea you're rewarded for breaking into our country, either via bribing and paying your way on a boat or agreeing to work for a criminal gang when you arrive here as a way of sort of paying your passage. And that's what's annoying people. It's this perceived it's the unfairness of this. The feel that it's unfair. People are getting something that they shouldn't be getting, and the fact that they're leaving France, a safe and democratic country. People step forward to help Ukraine. We're very pleased to do that across the country. We saw people step forward to help them when Putin launched the all-out offensive 4 years ago. We saw with things like Hong Kong and other incidents where the British public have been very generous and very wanting to support people who are facing difficult circumstances. But that doesn't mean that we should become treated like mugs. And where we see people who fundamentally are leaving a safe and democratic country because they prefer to come to the UK and they want to game a Gordian knot of human rights and immigration and asylum law to exploit that to try and get a reward for fundamentally illegal behaviour breaking in the country. And that's ultimately where the solution lies, is it's cutting through that knot, it's having practical plans and getting people out of the country. And that does mean taking difficult decisions around things like a Rwanda plan, but also, particularly where we talked about foreign national offenders, it does mean having to look at returns to places like Afghanistan as well.
Kevin, always a pleasure. Thank you for your time on this Thursday night. That's Kevin Foster, former Immigration Minister and former Conservative MP for Torbay in Devon. He's right, isn't he? He is right. You know, sometimes I think people forget that this country has a terrific and proud track record of giving asylum to people over the last 100 years. Jews fleeing Nazi Germany, people fleeing Ukraine, all kinds of examples, and we've done it, rightly so. And for people to somehow come along and go, well, actually, you know, we should be doing more to support people who are breaking into this country and claiming asylum, I frankly think is for the birds. I think we all want to support people who are genuinely fleeing or have fled tyranny or violence. But it just doesn't wash with me that if you're in France, it's such a horrific country that you have to leave it to come to Britain in order to feel safe. It just doesn't stand up to any form of scrutiny. You know, France is a democratic country. I mean, maybe they don't like the coffee and want to come here instead. I don't want to sound flippant about it, but, you know, all of these do-gooders who say, oh, we need to do more to help people, we do more than our fair share, and history has shown over the last 100 years we are prepared to do it. But when people start taking the mick, that's when the great British people get increasingly fed up. This is Talk.
Go to Calais train station?
Yes, train station.
Okay. I was dipping. It was brutal. Come on, guys! Ready, full fence, go on! And they're on the way over to UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
9:20, Thursday night. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Duncan Barkes. It's the evening exchange through until 10 tonight. Phil Dave here from 10. After 9:30, we're going to be talking about that grubby little man. I can say that, can't I? Gianni Infantino, and how UEFA are preparing to bring criminal proceedings against him over his plan to sell shares in the World Cup. We'll get some thoughts and wisdom on this from football reporter Tim Vickery. That's after 9:30 tonight here at Talk. In the meantime, let's get a load of your calls and voice notes on the air. Talking about our benefit system, this is Jim.
Hello, Duncan. I think the biggest thing that Labour and these socialists miss with the whole benefits argument is, sure, they feel sorry for all the people that are struggling and so on with disabilities, don't we all? But I think what they actually miss out on is people that are really struggling to pay their bills. And the middle class, the working class, people will go to work every day. It's not easy. It's not easy to do a job every day, especially long hours. All sorts of people do all sorts of different jobs. What about those people? They're the ones that are trying to get ahead, and they're the ones that are being really squeezed. And what makes it even harder is when we then turn around and look at some of these Labour MPs who are sending their own kids to private school and just living it up with as much money as they need.
Oh, yeah. I mean, hypocrisy among certain socialists serving in our government, you know, putting VAT on private schools, sending their own kids to private schools because they can afford the 20% increase in fees. Or even worse, they've been to private schools themselves and they want to make it more unaffordable for those parents who might want to send their own kids to private schools. You couldn't make it up, but you shouldn't be surprised. Jim, thank you for that. It's very clear, I think, that this country is turning into a country, again, it's a two-tier country of those of us that work and put in a shift and those of us who don't. And the usual caveat applies. Those people who don't work, there are people because of their health conditions who simply can't do it because those conditions are going to get worse. And you and I would never want to be in their shoes. However, I have seen firsthand, and I think a lot of viewers and listeners to Talk will know of people who say they can't work, but they could if they were forced to. And those people are going to damage our economy beyond repair if we carry on forking out the sheer amount of money that we do. Thank you, Jim. This is Ruth.
Hi, I am on PIP. I have a low amputee. My right leg is fused together. I am also blind with a guide dog. I wouldn't be able to make a face-to-face appointment because my daughter also has FND. When she collapses in the street, we have to get taxis home, so I wouldn't be able to go to an appointment. I think the good move would be to go through the DWP list and find out what people are supposed to be diagnosed with. Have a great night.
I think you're right, Ruth. I'd also made the observation with respect that you're exactly the kind of person that our welfare state should be supporting, and your daughter as well. Let's take some calls on this. This one's in Cheshire. It's Les. Hello, Les. Welcome.
Hi. How are you doing?
Very well, sir. What would you like to say?
Yeah, what it is, I think there's a misunderstanding in regards to PIP. A lot of commentators come onto your show and start explaining what PIP is. Now, I've played PIP since 2019. Now, I've gone through 5 assessments during that time, and every assessment has been face-to-face. So there's definitely a scam going on when people are actually claiming PIP online.
You think that's a scam when they're doing it online?
They're doing it online.
Yeah.
Based on the fact that they get all this information, they fill the form in, whatever. But the forms are so complex when you do it on a face-to-face, you have to go in with then details, you know what I mean? Yeah. And you've got to have the medical support to do it. Now, based on people having mental health problems, they do not get a car. They do not get a free car. If you've got mental health problems, you're not going to put someone in the car who's got mental health problems because they're on medication. And it comes in 2 forms. It's called the daily living component and the mobility car component, or the mobility component. And if people are getting a car, that mobility component is paid towards that car. So you don't get a free car. You only get 400 odd quid every 4 weeks. So you part pay that payment on your mobility performance to get that car.
So just so I'm clear and listeners to Talk are clear, if you have a mental health condition, you're not eligible for PIP. However, if you have other conditions, aside from maybe a mental health condition like a physical condition, you would have access to PIP. So
it's a disability condition.
Yeah.
I have osteoarthritis.
Yeah.
So it affects all your joints and stuff. So I have a mobility car that is adapted in order me to drive that car because it's automatic and I've got the thing on the steering wheel. And I've also got another name driver on that if I can't drive it, they can set me to appointments on it. So, but the thing is, half of your PIP payment goes towards that car. So you don't get that money, it goes towards that car. So when people are turning around and saying you get PIP payment, and they're turning around and saying you get a free car, you don't get a free car. You have to pay for it through your PIP payment.
Understood. Let me just ask you, because you said something quite interesting a few moments ago, or you said a lot of interesting stuff, but the idea that online applications, if you like, as opposed to face-to-face, is a scam. Would you go so far, Les, to say that the future has to be people being assessed face-to-face?
Correct. However, you've got an NHS problem, haven't you? And the thing is, because you've got not enough consultants who are doing these face-to-face, and this is all by the by because of COVID, because they locked down and people were making these online claims, that they've got used to them online claims, and most of the stuff is AI generated. So when they go online and look at how you complete a PIP form, they tell you how to complete it, and therefore they put, when you have to call the DWP number on the 0800 number. That's what I used to do, and I've been through 5 assessments, and then 5 assessments were face to face. I've never been online to fill in a PIP form.
Really interesting call, because I think the picture we're building here, we're going to get a proper grip on people maybe accessing benefits that they really don't need and saving the government of the day and slashing the welfare bill. We need to return to a couple of things. We need to have those face-to-face assessments that you experience, Les. And also, I think we need to have an element of means testing in here. It might sound brutal, but if you've got the assets and the ability to fund stuff for yourself, maybe the state shouldn't be doing it. Les, a great call, thank you. Only going to move it on because I want to get a new caller on the air. This one's in Kent and it's Matt. Hello, Matt.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, sir. What would you like to say tonight?
Right, I would just like to say I am on universal credit at the moment, having been made redundant from a job that I was in 17 years, and I hate being on benefits.
Yeah.
Hate it.
What was the job, Matt, if you don't mind me asking? What were you doing for
financial services?
Yeah.
Financial services.
Yeah.
Because of all the commission stuff going on with motor finance at the moment, I was made redundant.
Right.
I've paid in all my life, my life.
Yeah.
I've worked since the age of 16, paying tax and everything else. And now I live on my own. I don't even get enough money to pay my rent. The only reason I'm still surviving is that my mum died. And what I'm so disgusted about all of this is that if I'd have come over here on a dinghy, I would have got everything paid for. But I'm on my knees at the moment, and it's just wrong. It's just so unfair.
Can I ask you, Matt, some questions? Would you mind if I asked you a couple of questions?
Of course, of course.
So, I mean, I can't begin to imagine what it's like losing a job after 17 years. And it's very clear from what you said that you're a grafter and you want to work. So when you found yourself outside of employment, what was the kind of system like that you faced to start accessing some form of support?
Absolutely dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. I was living with someone at the time who was actually all she had was a state pension, and they were taking that off of what I was allowed to have. So they were going to pay me basically £400 or something like that a month. My rent is £1,200 a month. And how are you supposed to survive on that? It's completely impossible. Completely impossible. I split up with her for a variety of reasons, but now I'm getting £1,100 from the state. I was a high rate taxpayer as well. Now I get it doesn't cover anything.
No,
it doesn't cover anything, and I'm just so annoyed about how
Well, if you don't mind me saying so, I mean, you're being a very well-behaved new caller to talk, and I thank you for it. You used the term annoyed. If I was in your shoes, I'd be bloody angry, because here you are. Yeah, you've done everything by the book. You try and pay your way in life. Now you need a bit of support. It sounds like it's an uphill struggle, and yet understandably, you see people who and people often make this comparison, and I understand why. People who have come to this country effectively illegally by breaking in. And they get a lot of stuff provided to them by the state, yet you're someone who's paid into the system all of your working life so far, and you're struggling to get a little bit of support. Can I ask you, are you searching for work at the moment?
I've actually secured a new job.
Brilliant.
Starting in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, well done, mate. That's good. Well, how do you feel about that? You must be over the moon.
I am over the moon about it. It's taken me nearly 18 months.
Yeah, yeah.
And anyone who says that I'll just go out and get a job, it's not that easy.
Well, I was going to ask you about this
particularly
because
at my age.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how old you are. You don't have to tell me. But I
51.
Right. 51. So well, we're in the same orbit. And I was saying earlier, and I don't know if you heard it, that in late 80s, early 90s, you wanted a part-time job. You went into a shop, you handed over your CV, you got a call from the manager. You did a trial shift. If you didn't cock it up, you got the gig, right? And those days have completely disappeared. So if I can ask you, because we're of a similar age, I mean, what was it like going back out into the world searching for work? What was the worst thing about what you experienced first time round, maybe 30 years ago, and what you've experienced recently?
Right, well, 30 years ago, I was headhunted, so I got a job.
Yeah.
And it was great. But this time round, everything is all online.
Yeah.
And it's all done by AI and all the rest of it. If your CV doesn't quite work, you've got no chance. It is horrendous. It is my life. The last, I don't know, 18 months has been horrendous because you're sending stuff off and you don't get anything back. It is horrible.
Well, I was going to ask you about this. I mean, I've got young people in my life, and I know people have applied for jobs, and they never hear anything back. There's not even a thank you for your application, you've not been successful this time. And I just think, one, that's bloody rude, but two, it must be heartbreaking to not even get any response whatsoever.
Honestly, it is soul-destroying. It is horrible.
Yeah.
Really, really horrible. Fortunately, I've actually secured a job that I'll start in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
It's not what I really want to do, but I just want to work.
Yeah, yeah.
I wish there were more people in this world that feel like I do.
You want to earn, and you want to contribute as you've always done. Final question, and don't name any companies or whatever, but what kind of work are you going to be starting in a couple of weeks?
I'm working from home on just basically. It's almost like a call centre thing.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a bit beneath me, but I need to work, and it's a start.
It is a start, and you get that experience, and it can take you elsewhere. Matt, mate, thank you for calling. Talk for the first time, a new caller, and I think I know I do, and I think all of our viewers and listeners will wish you the very best of luck. It's 25 minutes to 10. It's Talk on a Thursday night. Up next, we chat football with Tim Vickery.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's 20 to 10. Ahead of 10 o'clock tonight, we will do more of your calls and more of your messages as we talk about Harry and Meghan and who should be paying for their security, and also a little bit about Britain's benefit system and how we can make it better and, more importantly, fairer. We'll do some more of those messages and calls ahead of 10 o'clock tonight. Phil, Dave here after 10. In the meantime, though, let's turn our attention to a bit of football here involving this grubby little man. European football's governing body UEFA is preparing to bring criminal proceedings against FIFA president Gianni Infantino over the attempt to sell shares in the World Cup to private investors. Let's get a view on this from football reporter Tim Vickery. Hello, Tim.
Hello, very good evening to you. How are you doing?
I'm very well indeed, and always a pleasure to get you on Talk, and thank you for your time on this Thursday night. So let me get this straight. Despite FIFA President Infantino dropping plans to sell off stakes in the World Cup and its other competitions, so I think it's fair to say there was global condemnation of, UEFA are still determined to pursue criminal proceedings against him. Why is this?
You know, there's a reason that over the last 65 years, there have been fewer FIFA presidents than there have been popes. FIFA has 211 members, that's nations. Yep. It's one nation, one vote. Now, that gives the FIFA president an enormous power of financial patronage. So what UEFA are doing here, UEFA, the European Association, is trying to undermine him, just chipping away, chipping away. First, there came the threat of a European boycott of FIFA competitions. Now, I don't think that was ever really going to happen, because that would have annoyed a lot of the rest of the world and a lot of European players as well. But that was a shock tactic. And they've achieved their aim from that, which is that Infantino has withdrawn the plan to sell a stake in the World Cup to private equity. But he's still there. Yeah. He's still in power. So this is the next stage. This is the legal challenge. Now, the outcome of this legal challenge, I suspect, is not the first priority. The first priority here is to make it abundantly clear that Infantino's scheme was not only on dubious ground morally, it was a bad deal in business terms. One of Infantino's main financial advisor, Mr. Cordero, resigned from FIFA as a result of this. So it's showing that Infantino has been taking autocratic decisions and bad decisions. That's the next stage. And there is a stage, I think, after that, because at some point, protest has to become proposal. Now, the next FIFA elections are in March, and what Europe and those who are opposed to Infantino will have to do is come up with an alternative candidate with alternative proposals that can win over the majority of the 211 membership. Now, that alternative candidate will almost certainly not be from Europe, but he will be Europe-backed. The front runner would seem to be Mr. Modigliani from Canada. So there are 1, 2, 3 stages here. Europe is playing the long game in trying to unseat a very powerful man who is the president of FIFA.
Well, I was branding this man earlier a grubby little man, and I feel kind of vindicated, because you look in their application for evidence, UEFA has said the following: in truth, it was a vehicle for Infantino and that small circle to acquire a permanent stake in and otherwise profit from FIFA's most valuable assets to the detriment of FIFA, its members and other parties within the football family. UEFA also claims the low prices were a fraudulently off-market price promoted by Infantino for his own benefit. I mean, it really sounds like he's just been on a money-making mission here.
Yes, and his time as FIFA president is limited. This plan would give him an extended time as a kind of CEO of the new company. Now, I think one of the reasons that Infantino did this at the time that he did it is that he's been trying to ride 2 horses moving in opposite directions. On the one hand, remember his power base, those 211 global associations, his power base is a global south. And he purports to be a defender of the global south. But he's teamed up with Donald Trump. And we saw US immigration policy there in the World Cup, making it very, very hard for fans for a number of countries to get into the States, making it difficult for some players and officials. And in the case of one very highly rated referee from Sudan, barring his entry. Now, FIFA and Infantino purport to stand up for the football family. Infantino did not do this. So it's very hard to be both a defender of the Global South and an ally of Donald Trump. And maybe Infantino rushed this scheme through in a bid to stuff people's mouths with gold and hope that they would forget how his alliance with Donald Trump had proved to the detriment of the Global South. But his plan has been derailed. He still clings to power, but UEFA is playing the long game to try and get rid of him.
You mentioned at the beginning of our chat, Tim, that this is like this is a process of chipping away here. How long realistically do you think he's got?
Well, the next election would be in March. I think the dream scenario for UEFA and the opposition would be for Infantino to come to a conclusion before then. His position is untenable and he's not going to win the elections, and for him to resign. If not, then, as Winston Churchill would say, let these grave matters be put to the test, and let's have a democratic context with rival candidates. Now, this is important because there are many associations around the world who have, and this is understandable given the way that football administration has gone, who have a fear of Europe and a fear that Europe will try and monopolise the whole thing. It is interesting. In an age where in so many fields of human activity, Europe is becoming less relevant, in football, Europe is becoming more relevant and more dominant. So there are associations around the world who have more fear of a European-dominated FIFA than they do of Infantino. What it's up to Europe to do is forge these alliances and come up with an alternative proposal that can win over enough of the membership. And I think one of the things which will almost certainly happen, it works mathematically, but it's a logistical nightmare, is a further increase of the World Cup up to 64 nations.
Final question. I mean, I saw some footage several days ago now where he was tackled by a Sky News or Sky reporter trying to ask questions about this, and he started banging on about the bloke being as bald as he is, and he looks forward to seeing the reporter down the hairdresser, completely fudging it, you know, complete distraction. And I found myself thinking, what is it about Infantino? Is it just, I mean, just read the room, mate. Is this stupidity or is this arrogance that leads us to conclude that he's just not prepared to read the room and step down?
But he does have support, and some of the Middle Eastern associations have come out in support of him, and he's trying to cling on to the support base that he has. And as I said at the start, you know, there have been fewer FIFA presidents than popes. Yeah. But sometimes if you surround yourself only with the powerful, it becomes difficult to. The history of Roman emperors is full of these kind of stories, and Infantino a little bit is coming across as a Roman emperor of FIFA as it stands. I suspect that he may well be holed below the waterline, but as I said, the FIFA president is a very, very strong position.
It could be a case of a slow sinking. Tim, thank you for your wisdom and knowledge. That's football reporter Tim Vickery regarding the latest involving European football's governing body UEFA preparing to bring criminal charges or criminal proceedings against FIFA's president Gianni Infantino. It's Talk. It's a Thursday night. It's just turned 10:15. More of your calls and messages next.
go to Calais train station?
Yes, train station.
Okay. I was dipping. It was brutal. Come on, guys! Ready, full touch, go on! And we're on the way over to UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Duncan Barkes. It's Talk, the home of common sense. The common sense continues after 10 o'clock tonight with Phil Dave. In the meantime, let's get some of your messages on the air and some of your calls as we continue to chew over the arrival of Harry and Meghan on these shores. They landed at Birmingham Airport yesterday lunchtime. Who should pay for their security? It's one of the questions we've been mulling over. And also, where do you think all of this is going to end? 0344 499 1000, and some really good calls tonight and insight as well, talking about the benefit system here in Britain. How do we make it better and how do we make it fairer? Let's take some calls. This one's in Buckinghamshire. It's Serge. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Duncan. So first of all, the benefit system and PIP in particular.
Okay.
If you are an able-bodied person, you should go to work. Now, I claim PIP because I have severe heart failure. For 30 years, I worked for a living, and now that I can't. But anxiety, depression, ADHD, these are not conditions. These are manifested. People like to sit on their arse. The other thing I want to talk about...
Well, let me just pick up on what you said there. I mean, people who have suffered from clinical depression may well take issue with you and say it's not just a case of me sitting on my arse.
To be honest, Duncan, I disagree. Because who doesn't have anxiety or depression?
Well, we're not talking about anxiety. I mean, let's take the example of clinical depression. Have you ever had it?
No, I haven't. I do have a depression because of my condition.
Understood. But when we talk about clinical depression...
Clinical depression...
Do you not think that's a justifiable condition? I'm not talking about anxiety. I'm not talking about waking up in the morning and feeling a little bit sad. I'm talking about full-blown clinical depression.
I totally agree with you. There are some people who cannot cope with what life throws at them. But a lot of people are taking the mickey. There are people that I know personally, right, who there's nothing wrong with them on a day-to-day basis, but they get PIP. Why do they get PIP? They go about their daily business every day. They wake up in the morning, they have breakfast, they go out, they drive around, and also they get mobility cars.
So, Serge, let's pick up on this. I mean, one of the things that's been discussed tonight is we need to do more face-to-face assessments because a lot of these assessments... Hang on a sec, hang on. A lot of these assessments have gone online, particularly after the pandemic. People have also suggested to make our benefits system fairer and to make sure that people who really need the help are getting it. We need to means test people before they get benefits. Would you support either or both of those measures?
Both of them. Basically, I've applied for PIP twice in my lifetime. The first time it was for depression and anxiety, and I had a face-to-face meeting and I was rejected. I didn't fight that because, you know, the decision was what it was. The second time round was all on medical grounds. I didn't even have a face-to-face meeting. It was enough for me to send in all my medical information.
That's really interesting. Listen, I'm going to move it on only because I want to get a voice note on the air regarding this. This is a voice note from Peter.
Good evening, Duncan. Well, this benefits thing
the whole bill, people don't realise they heap our state pension in with that bill as well, right? So they should take that off because it's not a bloody benefit. Then they should also single out and tell us, break it down to tell us how much of the welfare benefits bill is spent on people that have just come into this country legally or illegally, who shouldn't still really, they shouldn't be getting it, should they? I agree with you on the kids' jobs. My granddaughter applied for over 200 jobs and not one of them gave her a reply. Luckily, she's got a job now, so it's fine. And yeah, all these people flooding into our country from safe countries, they are taking the pee. They are taking the pee big time. Anyway, I like your show, mate.
Thanks, Peter. Just picking up about what you said about employers not replying to applications. This is an anonymous message, but I'm going to read it out. It says, most businesses like mine don't reply to applicants, as the vast majority of people applying for jobs are utter dross, poor grammar, and often with worthless degrees to supposedly propel them to stardom. It's tiresome seeing applicants like that. Yes, they're not all like this, but lots of them are unemployable, and no, I'm not telling them thank you for applying when they're this poor. I'll just make the observation, anonymous person, if you're going to have a pop at people who can't spell properly and can't use grammar properly, you really need to work on your messages. One here from Flossie, or Sarah in Liverpool. Duncan, if people can type on Facebook, they can work. If they can pick up a phone and talk, they can work. I'm terminally ill with 2 jobs to support my family. I am not entitled to high-rate mobility, but my neighbour with anxiety was awarded a car. What is wrong with our country? On the subject of Harry and Meghan, this is Grace. Hello, Grace.
Hi. Yeah, I was really hoping when Harry and Meghan kind of became so prominent about a decade ago that they'd be doing some really positive things in our world. We've heard tonight about the horrors in Nepal, which I always think about because my mum spent a bit of time there while she was training as a midwife, so I always have heard stories about Nepal and how the people there are really friendly and resilient, but they're going through horrific things.
Yeah.
And Meghan had worked with one of the charities that helps with disaster relief around the world and which helps some of the world's poorest people. And I thought, this is great. We're going to someone in the royal family supporting these causes, and it's so exciting how much impact we can make to the world's poorest people. They can be helped far more effectively pound for pound than when money is spent here. But then she decided to make expensive jam and talk about her celebrity friends. And I just thought, what a shame. We don't need more, Gwyneth Paltrow wannabes trying to make us feel like we somehow are deprived because we don't have an elaborate kitchen like hers. And it seems such a shame to me. And now we've heard about how Harry has had money that should have gone to, I think, AIDS and HIV affected people and orphans, I think, that money was supposed to be allocated for and has been sent to elephants instead. I mean, no offence to elephants. I just think, they're coming over here living in luxury.
Well, I don't want to offend any elephants either, but you mentioned the jam. The jam's interesting, isn't it? I don't know anyone who would ever buy a jar of jam made by Meghan, do you? Who's buying this stuff? Who's buying this stuff?
Yeah, I think we have a culture where people kind of look at those who are really, really rich and then they think that we're not well off because we don't have as much as they do. And actually we forget that a lot of people in our world have so much less than we as Brits do. And we become less satisfied with what we do have because we've got people like Meghan just constantly showing off. And it's just really not helpful. And I just feel it's such a shame.
A final question, if I may. On the issue of who should pay for their security, should it be the British taxpayer or should they fund it themselves?
Of course they should fund it themselves, for goodness sake. The British taxpayer, on average, is far less well off than they are. They should fund it themselves.
Yeah, and we're skint as it is because we're paying for everything else. Grace and Ealing, thank you. Thank you for all of your calls and all of your messages tonight, and thank you to the team behind the glass. It's been a cracking show. I am back here 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. That'll be Friday afternoon, in for Ian Collins. But after 10 o'clock tonight, it's the one and only Phil Dave. Good evening.
Good evening, Barks. What an absolute treat.
I know. We normally do this over a glass or six.
I was going to say, actually, I feel like the Sunday roast is missing.
Where's the corkscrew gone?
Yeah.
What are you
I lost it.
I'll lend you mine. What are you doing after 10?
That's a very good question. Look, we're going to...
Do you know?
We're going to carry on... Look, I do know, don't you worry. We're going to carry on quite a lot of what you've already been speaking about. Obviously, Harry and Meghan.
Yeah.
Still continuing to cause headlines, and I mean, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, I get so bored of talking about those two, but at the same time, you kind of love to talk about it, even though you hate to talk about it.
Well, it's a little bit like rubbernecking, isn't it, if you're familiar with that term? And it's an awful habit to get into, but you see maybe a car crash on the other side of the road and people all slow down and have a look.
Yes.
And this is a form of car crash, which leads me to ask you, where do you think all of this is going to end up?
Well, I mean, I think it will end in divorce.
Do you?
Yeah. I just don't see how the two of them
Is that why they've come back? Has Harry come back because he wants the kids in this country and then divorce is going to
Well, I reckon...
Has he had enough?
Well, so here's my thinking.
Go on, what's your theory?
I don't know whether or not there's any truth in this at all. This is pure speculation, so please don't take me on it. But I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised if he's finally flipped. You know, he's kind of said, look at what's happened to me. I've lost all of my friends and my family. You've made me move to your country where basically it's absolutely not worked for me. I've had enough. And if you don't give my country a try, we're done.
All of that wacky